Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's Opening Succession to Darkseid. Chapter 41. This person is really. Looking at the surrounding scenery, Nanjo also gave a wry smile. What the hell is the King of Darkness? How do you do things like this? Ancient One at the moment looked at Nanjo, his eyes were a bit complicated. In the story of Nanjo, he is a dark monarch, a dictator, and a ruler. Can such a person on the earth really make the earth safe? Although he doesn't look like a bad guy now, how about when he was in his own universe? Will it look the same as Dormammu? Countless thoughts rushed into Ancient One's mind, and she no longer believed in Nanjo as before. Nanjo naturally felt the anomaly of Ancient One and understood what Ancient One was thinking. He has portrayed himself as a big villain, and Ancient One naturally wants to guard himself for the safety of the earth. In order to protect the earth and find a successor, he even traded with Dormammu for dark magic. No one can deny Ancient One's love for the earth. Now that the matter is settled, let's go back. Nanjo turned around and walked outside with his hands behind his back. Ancient One looked at Nanjo's back, hesitation for a moment, and followed. Do you pose a threat to the earth? Halfway, Ancient One asked. This is exactly what she worries about the most, and now she asks it without concealment. Nanjo heard this question and touched his chin. Yes, a high probability. No, after all, I have been here for 20 years. Although I have lived for so many years, I still have a little affection for this place. When Nanjo said this, he was actually acting, in order to maintain the identity that he created for himself. After all, he is now a villain. If Ancient One notices something wrong, then the story he made up will be over. Seeing Nanjo said so, Ancient One must be uneasy. She definitely didn't continue to ask, but made up some thoughts in her heart. Now I am still sure whether Nanjo will pose a threat to the earth, although he looks very friendly, but Ancient One will not take it lightly. So she intends to monitor Nanjo, monitor his every move, even if it is discovered, it doesn't matter. If you want to monitor me, I advise you not to do it. Although Ancient One didn't express his thoughts, they wrote all of them on his face. Nanjo naturally saw what she was thinking at a glance. Ancient One was a little surprised to see that his thoughts were exposed by Nanjo's words. Just listen to Nanjo's laughter. How do you say you are a few hundred years old? You should understand the truth that you can't calm down your anger. Seeing Nanjo was taunting himself, Ancient One couldn't help but give him a blank look. I don't like the feeling of being watched, so you still don't do it. I don't want me to hurt your person and then let the relationship between the two of us decline. And at least I am not interested in the earth now, at least until you find a successor, I will not start with the earth. It is harmless for Nanjo to befriend a strong person like Ancient One, so he doesn't want to get into a stalemate with Ancient One. Definitely, if Ancient One died on its own, then Nanjo can't be blamed. So in order to keep the relationship between the two of them at the level of friends, Nanjo chose to persuade. Definitely, there is a slight threat in this persuasion. Although Nanjo wasn't sure who was the better one between himself and Ancient One, he still revealed a threat in order to cater to the identity of the villain he had created. Ancient One shook his head when he heard Nanjo's words. Since you say that, then I hope you will do what you say. What Ancient One said is what Nanjo said will not move the earth before finding a successor. Nanjo smiled upon hearing this. Although I am not a good person in the original universe, I am still very trustworthy. Washington, in the hospital where Peggy is. Peggy's physical characteristics began to recover after Dormammu put the purple light group, or dark magic, into Peggy's spiritual body. And when Ancient One put Peggy's spirit body into Peggy's body, she slowly opened her eyes. The dark magic worked after all. Peggy's awakening surprised the doctors in the hospital. Because as early as 5 minutes before Peggy awoke, they sat for Peggy to check and found that there was no sign of awakening. But just after the arrival of Nanjo and Ancient One, Peggy woke up. Everyone sighed the miracle. I'm done helping, I'm leaving. Seeing Nanjo as if he was relieved, Ancient One turned around and planned to leave. Would you like to have a meal before leaving? Nanjo didn't know what to think, and suddenly asked. And Ancient One just shook his head. I still like to eat at Kamar Taj. If you want to find me in the future, go to the holy place in New York. I will inform Asgardian there to give you the green light. With that said, Ancient One suddenly remembered something, and looked back at Nanjo. Don't forget to ask Stark for clothes. Nanjo was taken aback by Ancient One's words, because he had forgotten again. I won't forget this time. Nanjo smiled slightly and watched Ancient One walk into the corner of the corridor. Did she ask you to help? Just after Ancient One left, Hill's voice came from behind Nanjo. Nanjo turned around and found Hill was behind him. Hill's gaze at the moment locked on Peggy's body. Peggy, who has just woken up, is still undergoing various checks by doctors. After you and that person came, she woke up. I don't think it's a coincidence. Hill said, turning his head to look at Nanjo, his eyes full of questions. Did you succeed? I don't know why. Hill suddenly feels a little lost, and his face is full of frustration. She still remembered questioning Nanjo before, even thinking that Nanjo was overconfident, always thinking that Nanjo was underestimating herself. But now it seems that she is really not strong enough, and there are many things Nanjo can do that she can't do. She can see that the gap between herself and Nanjofa is getting bigger and bigger, and the gap between the two is like a gap now. Thinking of this, he naturally felt low self-esteem. When Nanjo saw Hill like this, he also sighed. Just watch him come to Hill. Maria. Nanjo called Hill's name, but Hill didn't turn around. She didn't know what expression she should use to face Nanjo. Weekend, let's go out for a meal. Nanjo spoke again. He didn't want to see such a Hill either. I think there should be some misunderstandings between us that have not been resolved. I don't want our relationship to be so frozen, so let's get together this weekend and let us solve the misunderstanding, okay? Peggy has been transferred from the ICU ward to the general ward. Although the body is still very weak, but at least his life is saved. And Nanjo at the moment is sitting in front of Peggy's window and taking care of her frail. I seem to have a long dream. Peggy looked at the ceiling above her head and spoke suddenly. I dreamed that when I just picked it up, the rain that day was exceptionally heavy, and it was thundering. Peggy said to herself, while Nanjo was peeling an apple for her. He has no idea how many times he has listened to this story, so it would be better to leave it without exaggeration. Ever since Peggy got older, whenever Nanjo came to see her, she would bring this story with her. Then I sighed that time flies, he is old, Nanjo has grown so big in the blink of an eye. Soon, Nanjo had already peeled an apple, cut it up, tied a piece with a toothpick, and put it in front of Peggy's mouth. Peggy ate this apple quite naturally. What you have to do now is to take good care of your body. Nanjo interrupted Peggy's story and said, do you know how many people are scared by your attack? When Nick called me, his tone was quite nervous. Peggy laughed twice after hearing Nanjo's words. People who really care about me can count it with their hands, but there are still many people who hope that I can't pass this hurdle. As one of the former founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., Peggy back then can also be said to be in power, and naturally many people are offended. Although she is now retired, many people still want her to die. Peggy didn't care why she suddenly fainted. In her opinion, it was nothing more than someone who wanted her to kill in secret. But the result disappointed them. Although the doctor didn't know why, but he suddenly woke up. And besides being weak, the physical characteristics are all healthy. It seems that I should never die. Peggy thinks this way, but the truth is not that simple. Definitely, Nanjo will not tell the real situation. He was still more worried that when Peggy knew the truth, he would suddenly lose his breath again. After eating clean the apples that Nanjo had cut, Peggy's expression also eased a lot. When she was in the ICU, her face was pale and bloodless, but now she looks very energetic. Seeing Peggy like this, Nanjo also let out a sigh of relief. At this time, the door of the ward was pushed open, and it was Shui-Lun who walked in. She is here to replace Nanjo's class. Seeing Nanjo, Shui-Lun also nodded slightly. When you come, I'll go first. Nanjo still has some things to deal with. Seeing that Shui-Lun has come to replace him, then he would take this opportunity to leave. With that said, Nanjo turned around and looked at Peggy. Grandma, I have something else. I may not be able to see you these few days. Take care of yourself. Peggy showed a kind smile upon hearing Nanjo's words. Go, I'll be fine. In Peggy's view, as a 10th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nanjo has to deal with a lot of things. But the real situation is that although Nanjo is a 10th level agent, it is the most idle agent in the entire shield. Nanjo at the moment had already got up and left, and Sharon came to Peggy's side and squeezed her hand. The two began to talk. A few hours later, Stark's mansion. Nanjo entered Stark's mansion with his own mask. Although he had been here many times, he also got acquainted with Stark and others. But Nanjo still likes to sneak in. Avoiding all surveillance is a scan by Jarvis and successfully entered Stark's mansion. Obviously there is a front entrance, but Nanjo never left. This may be considered a kind of sickness of his own. After entering the mansion, Nanjo pushed aside the Stark office room without hesitation. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Stark leaning Pepper on the corner of the table, and the two kissed passionately. The sudden appearance of Nanjo shocked the two of them, and Pepper's face turned red. "Hey, knock on the door before you come in, okay?" Seeing that the person who came was Nanjo, Stark was very angry. This person never knocks, and now he doesn't even knock on the door of the room. Seeing such a scene, Nanjo was also a little embarrassed, and then smiled. Sorry, my fault, there won't be another next time." While Nanjo was talking, he gave way to the blushing Pepper. "Go ahead, why are you looking for me?" Stark took a sip of the chlorophyll in the cup, and then said. "I also know about that in New York. People from S.H.I.E.L.D. are still looking for me, hoping that I will persuade General Rose to tell me where Banner is." With that, Stark came to Nanjo and closed the door behind him. "One more thing is that S.H.I.E.L.D. is also investigating you and seems to want to include you in their Avengers plan." As Nick's first person to be included in the Avengers project, Stark still knows a lot. If you don't want to be found by them, it's better to keep a low profile during this period of time. Nanjo nodded. He had known about this for a long time, and Phil Coulson had told him. He even knew that Natasha Romanoff was investigating the matter. Even in the near future, Natasha Romanoff will enter Stark Industries as an assistant. "I came to you this time because there is something I need your help." Nanjo also sat on the sofa aside, explaining his intentions. "I want you to help me make a dress that won't break easily." After hearing Nanjo's words, Stark was taken aback for a moment, and then looked him up and down. "Your clothes are always damaged when you fight, and the mask you wear makes you look like a pervert, so you were looking for a piece of clothing that will not be easily damaged." Nanjo nodded. With his naked upper body and a mask, this dress made him feel too perverted. "This matter is not too difficult, I can easily handle it for you." This kind of thing is really not difficult for Stark. But at the moment Stark smiled, and this smile was obviously unkind. "I helped you, so what will you give me in return?" After getting rid of Nanjo a lot, Stark learned to talk about conditions face to face for everything. "It's like this thing," because that's what Nanjo did. Upon hearing this, Nanjo also smiled bitterly. This development had been anticipated by him long ago. Stark will never do things for himself lightly and unpaid. He definitely needs remuneration, and as for the content of the remuneration, Nanjo naturally has its own plans. An hour after arriving at the Stark mansion, Nanjo left the mansion. He and Stark had negotiated, and he gave a reward that Stark could not refuse. That is to make Nanjo owe him a favor. It seemed like a reward for farting, but it was very important to Stark. Even for anyone, it is difficult to refuse. It's really not easy for someone like Nanjo to owe him a favor. Owing a favor means that Nanjo can satisfy any requirement of Stark. No matter who Stark wants Nanjo to kill, save someone, or help with other things, Nanjo will do it. Stark didn't have to weigh the pros and cons at all. After Nanjo said such remuneration terms, he didn't even think about it, and directly agreed to Nanjo's remuneration terms. And let Nanjo draw out the clothing requirements he wanted on the spot. It can be said that the care is quite enough. And with a smile on his face, he watched Nanjo leave his mansion. In this way, Stark still felt that he had slaughtered Nanjo, which was a huge profit. Stark also saw the power that Nanjo used to explode an artificial lake when he was hating the duel. Nanjo's strength was stronger than he had imagined. After Nanjo left, Pepper walked into Stark's office room. Looking at her face, it is obvious that she is still shy because of the previous things. "What did you talk to him?" Pepper asked. Stark didn't hide it, and told Pepper about the transaction that happened just now. So you want to build a steel battle suit for him? Pepper heard Stark's words and asked his own question. Doesn't this make you superficial? Nanjo smiled slightly, then continued. The protective power of the steel armor is insignificant to such a strong one, and the steel armor also pays more attention to maneuverability, which he does not need. What he needs is lightness, comfort, and not easy to damage these 3 points. With that said, Stark took out Nanjo's drawing and handed it to Pepper. This is what he wants. Pepper took the drawing and looked at it, and then returned it to Stark. Seriously, I think this costume is better than your steel armor. When Pepper said this, Stark, who was drinking chlorophyll, choked, still spraying chlorophyll all over the floor. Ahem. Just watching him coughing frantically, there was a trace of embarrassment and even frustration in his eyes. How can I say that my own steel armor is now seen as peripheral products on the street? It can be said that the public are very accepting and like it. But Pepper's words made Stark instantly feel that everything was not so worthwhile. Nanjo only stayed in Stark's mansion for an hour, and then took a plane back to New York. Peggy still has Sharon taking care of him, and the date with Hill is on the weekend. During this time, he chose to return to New York to live with 3 little guys. By the time Nanjo returned to New York, it was already night, and the sky was completely dark. Nanjo decided to take the 3 children out to drive the meet. Nanjo drove them in front of a very nice hotel in New York, which was also a place for high-end crowds. This is the first time for the 3 little guys to go to such a place, so they are quite excited, talking and laughing in the car. And Nanjo's car was the place where he had fought against hatred. This place is still being renovated and rebuilt, and many people have lost their homes because they hated the battle with Nanjo. New York also spent a lot of money in order for these people to have a stable place. As for the pit exploded by his atomic breath, it seems that it is really going to be filled with water to create an artificial lake. This is where you fight with that ugly monster, isn't it? Lorna looked at the surrounding ruins and asked. Nanjo nodded in affirmation. The 3 children also knew Nanjo's power, and Nanjo did not conceal anything from them. They know that Nanjo has super ability, that Nanjo is an agent, and that the person who saved Hulk in the Hulk incident and who hated the battle is Nanjo. Your battle has left many people without homes. Lorna's eyes were still on these ruins, and the eyes were full of loss. These 3 children have all experienced the pain of losing their homes, and looking at everything in front of them, they seem to see themselves. Loss is inevitable. There is no way. Nanjo glanced at the lost 3 people and said, if I don't defeat that guy, more people will lose their homes. If I can, I don't want to cause such a big damage, but that guy can recover quickly, and I can only defeat him with this kind of ability that can kill him in seconds. Lorna nodded after hearing Nanjo's words. The battle between Nanjo and Abomination was broadcast live, and she also saw the terrifying recovery ability. She also understands that Nanjo must do this. But even if they all understood, seeing such a scene, the 3 of them still felt heartache. Nanjo also felt that the atmosphere in the car was too dull, so he played some cheerful music, and then walked around the ruins. In short time, the 4 arrived at their destination. A rather high-end restaurant. Just the sign on the facade shocked roar for the 3 children. They have an impression of this place. The rich kid in the class seems to come here often for consumption and will bring some photos of it. The 3 of them also wanted to come here to spend some money, but they never thought it would happen today. Looking at the 3 people whose jaws were about to fall, Nanjo also smiled slightly. Don't froze, come in. Seeing Nanjo said so, the 3 followed Nanjo and walked into the restaurant. The melodious music, quiet atmosphere, all these seem extremely tall. This made the 3 children even more excited. However, he still didn't say anything, he kept the excitement in his heart. They knew that if they yelled, they would make others feel that they were uneducated, and that they would also cause trouble for Nanjo. So they didn't do it. At this moment, at the square table beside them, a girl of the same age as Lorna noticed them. Isn't this a trio? The girl put down the knife and fork in her hand and looked at the 3 of Lorna with some surprise. This person is the rich boy in the 3-person class. The children of the rich family were also quite surprised to see the 3 of them. In her opinion, the identity of the 3 is also ordinary people. Why would you come here to consume? Every corner of high-end hotels reveals nobility and luxury. Even though they were seated, Wanda, Lorna and Pietro were still curious about everything. Knives, forks and plates with gold rims, and a candlelight in the center of the table. Not far from where they were sitting, there was a beautiful woman playing the violin. The three children looked at the other tables and found that everyone was very elegantly cutting steak or drinking red wine. They have only seen these behaviors on TV. Now that I have seen it with my own eyes, I naturally find it very strange. Dang, let all of this in Nanjo's eyes is a little dismissive. Although this restaurant looks high-end, neither the menu nor the tableware are truly high-end, only the appearance looks more noble. All the seemingly noble things in this restaurant are actually not that high level. The gold-rimmed tableware that allowed Wanda to play with them was just sprinkled gold dust. The ingredients in this store are not high-end at all. As long as people who have been to a real high-end restaurant and have a picky mouth, they can clearly taste the difference in ingredients. In fact, most of the elegant guests in the hotel are just for pretending. The real top-class society dismisses this kind of restaurant. Hard-wearing high-end is just as repelling as having money. For most people who eat here, that kind of elegance is just contrived in Nanjo's eyes. But why does Nanjo bring Wanda to such a hotel? Soon, the first dish was delivered. It was a plate of pasta sprinkled with green leaves, and the taste was not flattering. The flavor of this pasta was so strong that several guests at the next table covered their noses. The reason why Nanjo came to this restaurant with his three children was here, a pasta that Nanjo could not refuse. Although this restaurant is upscale, they still have their own specialties, such as the basil spaghetti in front of Nanjo. Unlike other basil pasta, their basil pasta has an inexplicable taste. Others will find it quite uncomfortable to smell, but Nanjo likes it unexpectedly. The three children naturally smelled this unacceptable smell, and their brows were slightly frowned. "Brother Joe, what is this?" Looking at the plate of spaghetti with basil in front of him, Pietro couldn't help asking. "This is your favorite food for Brother Joe," Nanjo said. Just ate a bite of pasta. The unique flavor rushed into Nanjo's brain, making him suddenly sigh. "That's so cool." Nanjo's sigh made the surrounding guests feel even more bored. Even if you eat something savory, what does it mean to make a sound? At this time, a man at the second table behind the three children has stood up and walked in the direction of Nanjo. "Mister, isn't it impolite to eat such strong-tasting food in the hall?" The appearance of the man made Nanjo put down his fork. And the man looked ugly at the spaghetti in front of Nanjo. "Everyone ate here very happily. Did you not consider our feelings when you brought out something that tastes so great? Either you go to the private room, or you just ask you to leave." This man showed a feeling of being above-minded in front of Nanjo, which made Nanjo very unhappy. "Are you the manager of the restaurant?" Nanjo looked at the man up and down and asked. Seeing Nanjo's dismissive expression, the man's face became gloomy faster. "I'm not the manager of the restaurant, I'm just an ordinary person who maintains our eating environment." Hearing this, Nanjo couldn't help being happy. "Good guys, ordinary people who maintain the environment where we eat. You can say so ashamed. You just want to show off, don't you?" Although the basil spaghetti in front of Nanjo is really great, Nanjo is not here to eat it once or twice. Some people stand up to speak, but most of them are calm and hope that Nanjo will go to the private room. Although these people seem to be very pretending to Nanjo, sometimes such pretends still make Nanjo feel very comfortable. This was different right now. This man seemed to want to show the limelight, wishing to ask Nanjo to leave the scene in a tough way. This man also seemed to be a little bit irritated because what Nanjo said just now was his inner thoughts. "I never thought of being popular, but isn't you ordering such dishes to attract people's attention?" The man turned the offensive directly, trying to use the same method to attack Nanjo. "Nanjo definitely doesn't eat this set. I ordered a dish from the menu. I didn't say that this dish can only be eaten in a private room. It makes sense for me to order it. You said I was attracting people's attention. Is that in the eyes of people who don't like durians? Those who eat durians are attracting people's attention." Nanjo deliberately put on a surprised expression and looked at the people around him. And those people also laughed. The man was stunned by Nanjo several times, and his face was a little uncontrollable. He stretched out his hand to catch Nanjo. Unexpectedly, Nanjo caught him directly, and when he twisted it, a heart-piercing pain suddenly hit. The pain caused the man to let out a scream. Dad! And in the position where the man was sitting at the beginning, a little girl stood up, and came straight to the man and Nanjo. Facing Nanjo is a slap. You let go of my father. You let go of my father. The appearance of this little girl stunned the three of Wanda. Because this person is the very rich guy in their class. After seeing the three Wandas, the little girl gave them angrily. This action made the three people very upset, but it also proved a truth, that is, if there is a father, there must be a son. And Nanjo looked at everyone around him again. You see, he did it first. If he talks to me calmly and wants me to go to the private room, how can there be so many things, right? Just as he said, completely ignoring the girl who was still slapped on the side, and then lightly exerted force. For Nanjo, it was just a light effort, but for the man, it was even more heart-piercing pain. Ah! The man let out a few screams. At this time, even the manager of the hotel rushed out and hurried to the table of Nanjo. Two, give me a face, stop this matter, how? The manager also accompanied the smiling face, and he didn't want to make his restaurant less customers because of this incident. I don't care, it's this guy, he doesn't seem to be convinced. As Nanjo said, he let go of the man's wrist. The man cursed and took 3 steps back, then blushed. You wait, I must make you look good. The man said, leaving the hotel with the girl. Watching the man and the girl leave the hotel in embarrassment, Nanjo spread his hands, then stood up and looked around. Because of Nanjo's attitude, the people around him will immediately put aside their gazes. I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused to you just now. I didn't expect the taste of this pasta to make everyone so annoying. Let's change to a private room. Nanjo is not an unreasonable person. He also noticed the expressions of the people around him after he came on his face. During the years when he was raised by Peggy, Peggy has been telling Nanjo to always think from the other side's perspective. So Nanjo made such a move, definitely this is for those children. He also hopes that these children will develop such a habit. Seeing that Nanjo was willing to go to the private room, the hotel manager was very happy, and quickly picked up the half-eaten side of Nanjo. Sir, we will make another copy of this dish for you. With that said, the manager handed the plate of noodles to the waiter on the side, and then personally took the 4 people to the private room upstairs. On the way to the private room, Nanjo also learned that the girl who slapped herself just now was Wanda's classmate. This also made Nanjo a little surprised. He didn't expect that Noda's New York City was so small. She has a lot of followers in school. Because she is always rich, whether it is a mobile phone or a school bag or other things, she will have the latest models. Pietro said at this moment. If she was really that rich, she wouldn't have come to such a place. Nanjo sneered twice when he heard this. If that person dares to trouble you at school, you are welcome, just call me and it will be over. If it is not convenient at school, then go outside the school, understand? Nanjo at the moment reminded the 3 of them. The 3 children now have the fighting skills Nanjo teaches them, which are definitely much better than ordinary peers. So if someone wants to bully them, they should learn to resist. They can no longer be beaten by others like the previous Okayan incident. In the end, Nanjo has to wipe their ass. The 3 also nodded separately, and they naturally understood what to do. Now they are no longer ordinary students at the mercy of others. They have the fighting skills taught by the shield agent. They don't bully or let others bully themselves. After arriving in the private room, the manager graciously offered 3 more dishes, and then left the private room. The view of this private room is very good, and the park on the side can be seen from the window. The 3 children naturally became curious babies again, sticking to the window and looking at the scenery outside. But time was short. Nanjo's new pasta was brought up, and there were other dishes that came together. When the 3 children saw the food coming, they also feasted on them. But obviously, after eating the dishes, the expressions of the 3 children were a little disappointed. Because the taste of the dishes is not as delicious as they thought. At least compared with Nanjo, it was still a lot worse. When Nanjo was training under Peggy, cooking was also a compulsory course. Whether it is Western or Chinese food, or Japanese food, Nanjo must learn. This is mandatory by Peggy. The reason given is that it can be mixed into the kitchen solo chef during the assassination. So Nanjo's cooking skills are quite good. Compared with Nanjo, the restaurant's dishes are far worse. Don't like it? Seeing the expression of the three children, Nanjo asked. The three also looked at each other, and then slowly nodded. A lot worse than Brother Joe. Wanda said this. Then I will cook for you tomorrow. Write down what you want to eat. After hearing Nanjo's words, the three children also nodded. But they did not put down the knife and fork in their hands. Although the taste of the dishes in this restaurant is not as good as that made in Nanjo, it is not that it is difficult to swallow. The taste can only be said to be quite satisfactory. And this was the first time that Nanjo brought them to such a restaurant, and even had conflicts with other people, so they naturally wanted to give Nanjo face. Seeing that the three of them had eaten the food, Nanjo also smiled in satisfaction. Time passed slowly. Just halfway through the meal, Nanjo unintentionally swiped outward. The private room they are in can see the entrance of the restaurant. And just to the left of the hotel's gate, there were a few vans parked, and the man who got off the van was the man just now. Just watching the man leaning on the van smoking a cigarette, chatting with a strong man who got out of the car at the same time with him. Seeing this posture, Nanjo smiled slightly. He naturally understood what this man was going to do. Thinking of this, Nanjo looked at the three children across from him. You eat slowly. I will go out and come back soon. With that, Nanjo got up and left the private room, and went straight downstairs. Just as Nanjo walked out of the hotel's door, the man smoking outside saw him. It's him. Accompanied by the man's yell, 20 people got out of the three vans. All of them are big and round, and when they see it, they are professional thugs. I won't clean up those three little things, I'll clean up you first. A smug smile was smeared on the man's face. Let this stinky boy humiliate himself just now, and now he is going to beat him back with the embarrassment just now. No matter how good he is, he can only be regarded as a sandbag in the face of so many people. Looking at the sturdy big men with full faces, Nanjo just smiled slightly, and then pointed to the alley to the side. His meaning is very obvious. If there is something to come in, talk slowly. The man was not in a hurry, and followed Nanjo's intentions behind him. And this alley turned out to be a dead end, with the black high wall and 20 sturdy men blocking Nanjo in the middle. The man became even more excited when he saw it. You asked for this, now you can't escape with your wings. As the man said, he directed the sturdy man behind him to come forward together and teach the young man some lessons. Nanjo looked at these people as if looking at ants, and Adam breathed over, and these people all turned into ashes. But Nanjo did not intend to do this. After all, he was not a demon. Seeing that walking in the forefront represented the sturdy man who had already punched him, Nanjo ducked sideways, and then hit the man in the abdomen with a punch. Seeing that this person didn't even say anything, he passed out. The others were also shocked when they saw this, and they stopped and looked at each other. This expansion is somewhat surprising. With just one punch, a sturdy man was placed. Just look at Nanjo at the moment, beckoning provocatively to these people. Don't froze, let's go together. The screams came and went one after another in that little alley. Those brawny men who looked big and round, could not hold a punch in front of Nanjo, and those who were beaten passed out. 20 big men, all of them foamed at the mouth by Nanjo, rolled their eyes and passed out. The man saw the scene in front of him and couldn't help but step back. How could he think that the final result would be like this? He thought that the arrival of 20 big men would beat the stinky boy in front of him and he would have to lie down in the hospital for 10.5 days. But the final ending is like this. Seeing those brawny men who were stumbling and unable to fight, and Nanjo who was pressing hard at every step, the men's legs began to tremble. I warn you. The man said it was uncomfortable to speak, and screamed tremblingly. Don't come near me. You heard me and you can't eat it. Nanjo couldn't help but smile at the man's words. Let me not eat it and go around. Didn't you see that all of your 20 big guys were beaten on the ground with one punch and one punch? Who gave you the courage to say such things? Liang Jingru. Nanjo's tone was taunting, and he looked at this man who was still doing his best, with a look of disdain. I tell you, my identity is extraordinary. As the man said, his legs softened and he almost fell to the ground. I'm mixing with Jin. You should know Jin. Nanjo was also taken aback when he heard the man's words. Seeing Nanjo like this, the man instantly gained confidence. He felt that Nanjo must have been frightened by Jinhee's reputation. Why? Afraid. Seeing that the man no longer speaks, his legs no longer tremble, his self-confidence immediately rises. If you are acquainted, just kneel down and confess your mistake. Although you are very strong, these 20 big men are just appetizers. If you continue to wonder what is good or bad, you will die very miserably. Jinbing, you should be aware of the fact that you don't want to die too ugly. The man was full of confidence, and his words became hardened. He raised his neck and pointed at Nanjo with the tip of his nose. Jin can be the king of the underground in New York, who does not know who does not know. If you provoke the people of Jinbin, the end will be very miserable. From poor to poverty, from the worst to ruin. But seeing the man returning to that arrogant and domineering look, Nanjo couldn't help but smile. Do you think I'm afraid of Jinian? Nanjo didn't stop his steps, and walked towards the man step by step. I was just surprised. I didn't expect it to be related to Kim again. Seeing that Nanjo was not frightened, the man panicked again for a moment. I advise you to think twice. I am a member of Jinbin. If you want to think clearly, if you don't want the 3 children to have an accident, you'd better stop. The man's words made Nanjo stand still again. Are you threatening me? Nanjo tilted his head and his face became quite serious. You threatened me with those 3 kids. The man heard the change in Nanjo's tone, and a cold sweat broke out behind his back. An ominous premonition came straight into my mind. It seems that he really annoyed this man. Nanjo at the moment is very atmosphere. Not because the man wants to hurt himself, but because the man threatens himself with the safety of the 3 Wanda. This is what Nanjo hates most, and it is also Nanjo's bottom line. Nanjo will not allow others to threaten themselves with their close ones. Whoever dares to do it is at his own risk. Nanjo had countless ways to expose the man in front of him to the wilderness without any evidence. It can also make his daughter and his friends live forever because of his actions. This is the fate of threatening Nanjo. Me. Seeing that Nanjo still had no plans to give up, the man's confidence also disappeared for the most part. People who threaten me generally have no good end. Nanjo quickened his steps with a gloomy expression, and before the man could react, he had already grabbed the man's collar. Even if you are a member of Jin, even if you are Jin himself, I will not let it go. Nanjo's words revealed fierceness. The man's face gradually paled, and his legs had returned to a trembling state once earlier. And it seems that you are a small person under Jinhee's hands. If Shang Jin asks, he may not even remember you. As Nanjo spoke, the corners of his mouth rose slightly, and the smiling man was terrified. Just watch. The man let out a scream, and then ran backwards frantically. But Nanjo would not let him go so simply. Once again, he grabbed his neck and directly drew him into flames, and also raised his fist, smashing it down with one punch. The screams came out of the dim alley again. People passing by were scared to leave when they heard this sound. Don't let this gangster handle things, don't get yourself into trouble. Time was short, the screams disappeared, and Nanjo also walked out of the alley. There is still blood on his hand, definitely this blood is not his. Back at the restaurant, he walked into the bathroom to wash his hands, and then returned to his private room. Seeing Nanjo coming back, the 3 Wanda's eyes were a little dissatisfied. What did you do? So long. Although the period of Nanjo's departure was not too long, it was definitely not short. Just watch. Nanjo showed an awkward smile on his face, then scratched his hair. My stomach feels a little uncomfortable, so I went to the bathroom and then came back. Nanjo's words made the 3 Wanda look at each other, and finally all 3 of them chose to believe Nanjo's words. The 4 of them cleaned up the remaining dishes and left the restaurant. When passing through the alley, the 3 Wanda did not feel anything abnormal. They didn't know what happened just now, and naturally they didn't know what brutal and inhuman things happened in the dim alley. As for the man and 20 big men, they were finally found in the alley. The person who found them called the police and called an ambulance. The 20 big men were fine, but the man was not very optimistic. Most of the teeth were lost, the arms and legs were broken, the eye sockets were in, the nose was broken, and many ribs were broken. It can only be said that the starter is extremely cruel. But the New York police found no information when investigating. Because all nearby surveillance data have been deleted and tampered with, no one has seen how these people became like this. So they found nothing, and the investigation was nothing more. Definitely, all of this is what Nanjo did. Nanjo wants to do this. It is naturally very simple. He is the actual agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is not a problem to change the monitoring. Only the man was miserable, and he needed his own arrogance and paid a painful price. Who is that person? Does it matter to me? In Jin Bin's mansion, Jin Bin just put down the heavy barbell, wiped the sweat from his body, and listened to his secretary's report. The incident on this report was that last night, a small character under Jin He was beaten, seriously injured and hospitalized. And the protagonist of this matter is Nanjo. It was the arrogant and domineering man who was beaten. After Jin He listened to the secretary's report, he looked disgusted. I have never heard of that person. Don't tell me anything I don't need to know. Jin threw the sweat-wiping towel aside, and then walked to the other equipment. There are always people who rely on my hands to be arrogant and domineering to everyone. If you have that leisure time, it is better to improve your own strength and improve your status under my hands. It's what it is now. Jin didn't look down on those who provoke everyone by his own name. It will cause a lot of trouble for yourself. If you get into S.H.I.E.L.D. or other powerful organizations, then you will be quite troublesome. And this time, Jin didn't need to think too much, he could guess that it was almost like that afterwards. Seeing that Jin didn't want to take care of such a thing, the secretary didn't say much about it and continued to report on the next thing. In another part of New York, Nanjo was cleaning the room in his own room. The 3 children have gone to school, and I don't know what it would be like to meet the daughter of the man who was beaten at school. But now that I think about it, I seem to have made too heavy a move, and that guy will probably need crutches for the rest of his life. However, Nanjo didn't regret it, who let this innocent guy provoke him, and even threatened him with 3 children. What Nanjo hates most is being threatened by others. So that man deserves it. But at this moment, his phone rang. Nanjo picked up the phone and found that Stark was calling. What's the matter? He answered the phone and asked about Stark. I hope you come here. I have questions about your clothes and need to negotiate with you. Stark's voice came from the other end of the phone, which made Nanjo feel a little strange. Didn't I have all the drawings? Is there anything else I need to negotiate? He didn't understand. He clearly told Stark in detail, but why did Stark still make such a request? You don't have to worry about this, you will be fine when you come. It will only benefit your clothes without harm. Seeing that Stark said so, Nanjo had no choice but to win, and then hung up the phone. After that, Nanjo sent a message to Wanda, telling himself that he was leaving for 1 day, and then he booked the day's flight ticket. After a certain flight, Nanjo came to the gate of Stark's mansion. It is still the same as before, bypassing the surveillance and security system and entering the mansion. And Stark was waiting for Nanjo in the underground studio. Similarly, there is Ethan. What's the situation? Nanjo saw the 2 of them and asked. Just watch Stark step forward. That's it. Regarding the quality of your clothes, I discussed with Ethan. We hope that your clothes can be hid by your blue beam of light without being damaged. Hearing what Stark said, Nanjo was taken aback for a moment. What's the meaning? Seeing Nanjo did not react, Stark spoke again. It's that we want your clothes to withstand the damage of the beam of light you used in New York. At this time, Ethan also stood up and added. For this we need the data of your beam of light, and hope you will release it to me on the sea in a while. Nanjo reacted after hearing this. It turned out that the 2 came to themselves to obtain atomic breath data. They want to create a dress that can stop the atom's breath from hurting. Nanjo felt a little unrealistic. Nanjo was even confident, he felt that vibranium should not be able to withstand the damage of atomic breath. But if the 2 want to check the data on their phones, let them collect it. He did not refuse, nodded and agreed. The 3 came to the beach outside the mansion. Stark put on the steel armor and came to a place directly invisible to Nanjo. Nanjo and Ethan were standing on the shore, because Nanjo could not fly, so they had to stand on the shore to release them. As for Ethan, he stood behind Nanjo and was talking to Stark. Stark has also made all preparations and communicated all the matters needing attention with Nanjo. Okay, we can start, Stark said to the communicator. The sound naturally reached Ethan's ears on the coast. Ethan gave Nanjo a thumbs up, and Nanjo nodded in response. After that, watching Nanjo stretch out his hand and gather his strength into his palm, a blue light group began to slowly emerge. Ethan, who was standing behind him, also felt that powerful force, and was a little bit speechless in surprise for a while. He finally understood why New York was shot out of an artificial lake. With this power, the power of Stark's arc reactor placed in front of it is not worth mentioning. Seeing that this power Nanjo had already condensed to the maximum, then he blasted out the direction he had agreed with Stark before. The huge amounts of power instantly turned the ground in front of Nanjo into ashes, even the seawater was separated, and the water close to the breath of the atom was also evaporated. Stark, who was on the sea, looked at the blue beam of light that was getting closer and closer, and he didn't dare to be negligent. He dare not make any mistakes. If this is a mistake, then he will be wiped out. He raised the instrument he had prepared, ready for the necessary path for the atom to breathe. Warning, there are huge amounts of energy fluctuations, and warning, there are huge amounts of energy fluctuations. JARVIS issued a warning. Obviously, when the distance was far away, Stark's armor felt this powerful force, and JARVIS also issued an urgent warning. But Stark didn't take a step back, waiting intently for the arrival of the blue beam of light. Soon, atomic breath passed not far in front of Stark. And the steel armor at the moment has also sounded the red alarm. The temperature is too high. The temperature is too high. A few plumes of white smoke had ignited on the surface of Stark's steel armor. This has proved the huge amounts of atomic respiration. It shows that the quality of Stark's armor is unable to resist this blow. At that time, there will be only a dead end for himself and the battle armor. Definitely, this time Stark was well prepared and he was not injured. The most important thing is that he got the data he wanted. This is too scary. The damage of Nanjo's atomic breath was really terrifying, and Ethan, who was standing behind him, was also full of surprise. Although the damage of this atomic breath is not comparable to that of a nuclear bomb, if it is fully released, it can also destroy countless streets. At this time, Stark flew back from the sea. It's perfect. We have got the data of your beam of light. Now we will analyze it, and then we will create the costume for you. Stark at the moment has lifted his mask and smiled. Seeing Stark so confident, Nanjo was rather confused. Why, what material are you going to use to make it for me? Vibranium. With that, he pointed to Stark's blackened armor that had been burned by the aftermath of the atom's breath. With the materials of your armor, it shouldn't be enough to stop my skills. Could it be that you really have vibranium in your hands? Even if Stark had vibranium in his hands, Nanjo couldn't guarantee that vibranium could really block his atomic breath. When Stark heard this, he also smiled, but his smile revealed the embarrassment of a difficult gap. I don't have that thing in my hand, but I will maximize the hardness of your clothes. Collecting data is only a reference. In fact, when Stark said this, Nanjo already knew what medicine this guy sold in the gourd. It is true that I want to give my clothes enough defense. But the most important thing is that Stark wants to obtain atomic breath data, and finally see if we can imitate one. After all, this thing is so powerful, he also sees it. If you are really mastered by yourself, then it will be a qualitative leap for your own armor. When he meets another guy like Iron Overlord, he can kill it directly. Is there any way to fly to the sky and let the opponent cool down? Not useful anymore. In the face of absolute power, all tactics are in vain. Nanjo naturally judged Stark's thoughts from his words and micro-expressions. Definitely, Nanjo will not stop Stark. He wanted to see if Stark could really recreate the atomic breath. If Stark can replicate the atomic breath, it means that Stark even has the power to surpass the laws of the universe. As the Marvel Universe, Stark is known as a mortal body, comparable to gods. Nanjo is still very curious about his limits. At the moment, S.H.I.E.L.D. has become a mess. Their satellite has just detected a huge amount of energy fluctuations in the California waters. And this volatility is exactly the same as the volatility produced by the force used by the man who claimed to be Darkseid when he was in New York. In other words, the man who claims to be the Dark Lord Darkseid, at the moment is in California at the moment. The origin of the fluctuation is very close to Stark's mansion. At the moment Nick sat in the office with a serious face. This shows that Darkseid and Stark may be acquainted. After all, in the Iron Overlord incident, the Darkseid also helped Stark, and Nick also saw the video. Now, send someone to Stark's house immediately. Be sure to investigate it for me. With that, Nick stood up himself. He was going to visit Stark's house in person. Now that we have this important clue, everything seems much simpler. Stark may be a major breakthrough. Starting from the point of Stark, it is really possible to find out who this person is. Shield, Nanjo still doesn't know what happened here. At the moment, he was in Stark's mansion, chatting with Stark and Ethan first. In fact, Nanjo had already noticed when he first arrived at Stark's house. At the moment Stark's face is not suitable for health. Even speaking is not very powerful. That is, when he obtained the atomic breath data before, his smile was very healthy, but immediately changed back to the unhealthy look before. It seems likely that the palladium poisoning is more serious. It is difficult to completely reverse the growth of palladium poisoning on his body by only relying on chlorophyll. After so long, Stark will only die in the end. Taking the reactor in his chest is a death, and taking it is also a death. The only difference is that one person dies early and the other dies late. Stark knows this better than anything else. So he is also hurrying to find materials that can replace the current generation of arc reactor. If there is no one in the house, Stark also followed Ethan's suggestion and replaced it with a battery similar to the one in the cave in the Middle East. This can relieve palladium poisoning and can also be adsorbent shrapnel. But this is not a long-term solution. Because the arc reactor can bring energy to the armor, which is not possible with batteries. So the most important thing for Stark now is to quickly develop new materials. Unfortunately, the road is not smooth. At this time, Nanjo's phone rang suddenly, and it was Phil Coulson. Nanjo answered the phone, and Phil Coulson's slightly irritable voice came from the other end of the phone. "Where are you?" "Stark's house." "Yes, what's the matter?" Nanjo did not lie, but told the truth generously. "Did you put the skill you used in New York on the beach near his home?" Phil Coulson continued to ask. "Yes, what? Shield found it." "Nonsense." Phil Coulson wanted to laugh at Nanjo, who was so inquisitive. "Since you know, you still ask. How do you say it is also Shield's 10th level agent? Such power fluctuations will not be detected by Shield satellites. Now Nick has sent someone to Stark's home, and Nick will also go there in person. Leave quickly, don't bump into it." The words of Phil Coulson stunned Nanjo. "Good guy, listen to what Phil Coulson said. Is this Shield all out in order to find himself?" After hanging up the phone, Nanjo looked at Stark and smiled, hee hee. "The beam of light I set just now produced energy fluctuations, which seem to have been detected by the Shield German satellite. Now people near Shield are coming here, and the director of Shield will also come here in person. It caused you a lot of trouble, you can deal with it depending on the situation." Hearing Nanjo's words, Stark was speechless for a while, and it seemed that this guy was planning to pat his butt and leave. "Only leave myself to deal with those Shield." One thing to say, Stark really doesn't want to contact these people. But at this time, Nanjo had already got up and walked directly outside Stark's mansion. Now people from Shield will appear at any time. If you walk 1 second late, you will have more chances to meet those people. Soon after Nanjo left, the door of the Stark mansion was knocked. Stark opened the door and found 2 men in suits standing outside. One of the men picked up the tag hanging on his chest. "Mr. Stark, we are the staff of Shield. Just now we detected huge amounts of energy fluctuations near your home. We suspect that it is related to the New York incident that claims to be Darkseid, so it is convenient for us to enter the house and talk." Looking at the name on the man's tag and the Shield logo, Stark curled his lips, then tilted his head. "Come in." The 2 Shield staff also smiled at each other and followed Stark into the mansion. When they walked into the mansion, they were surprised by the luxurious and technological decoration. "Just do it, hurry up if you have something to say, I have other things busy." After hearing Stark's words, the 2 nodded. They did not go around the corners, but straight to the point. "Mr. Stark, do you know the man who claims to be Darkseid?" Stark has no hesitation. "No." This answer surprised the 2 staff of Shield. They didn't expect Stark to respond so quickly, and even admitted it directly. Is it convenient to reveal the person's true identity to us? When he said this, Stark shook his head directly. This move actually met the expectations of the two. If everything happens too smoothly, then things won't feel so simple. Actually, I will tell you that although I know him, I also want to know his identity. Stark gave a wry smile, then spread his hands. Every time this person meets me, he wears a mask. Even the voice has been processed. I have never seen that person's true face. When Stark said this, the two staff members were also a little speechless. They couldn't tell whether Stark was lying or telling the truth. Then why did he release such a beam of light containing huge energy this time on the beach near your home? The staff asked again. It's actually very simple. He came to me this time because he wanted me to make him a defensive suit. Immediately afterwards, Stark told about Nanjo's finding of making clothes for himself, and his collection of beam data for defense. Definitely, Stark didn't disclose the huge energy of copying in order to obtain data. The staff heard this and grabbed a point. Then how did you get in touch? Since the two know each other, there must be a contact method, regardless of whether it is a phone number or an email address, there will definitely be one. But unexpectedly Stark just shook his head. There is no way of contacting between us. He contacted me on a single line. Anything comes to my house directly, bypassing all the monitoring systems, and breaking into the house privately. Stark chose to lie this time and even sued Nanjo. It might also be in revenge for Nanjo's failure to walk through the front door every time he came to their house. The two staff members conducted a series of inquiries, but the final result was still unsatisfactory. They only learned that Stark knew the Darkseid, but Stark knew very little effective information. The only thing he knows that may be useful information is that Darkseid asked Stark to build a defensive suit. That's it. This result inevitably disappointed the two staff. The last two got up, thanked Stark, and left Stark's mansion. As soon as the two left, they dialed Nick's over-the-air phone and reported the situation to Nick. On the plane at the moment, Nick, Phil Coulson and Hill were heading to California. The ringing of Nick's air phone also attracted the attention of Phil Coulson and Hill. Time is short, Nick hung up the phone, and the expression on his face was not very good. What's the situation? Did the investigation reveal anything? Phil Coulson hurriedly asked, and Nick just shook his head. The two people asked Stark, but Stark knows very few things. Whether it's identity or contact information, Stark doesn't know everything. Definitely, this doesn't rule out Stark lying. This guy is an old liar. After listening to Nick's words, Phil Coulson breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but again, he was also very contradictory. Phil Coulson has been struggling with Nanjo's identity. He felt that he knew the true identity of Darkseid and should report it to Nick. But he didn't, he chose to hide it for Nanjo. Because Nanjo was his lifesaver, if he hadn't been protected by Nanjo, then he might have died under the fist of the Iron Overlord. In order to repay his lifesaver, Phil Coulson naturally agreed to Nanjo and would never reveal his identity. On the one hand, his loyal shield, and on the other hand, his savior, Nanjo, Phil Coulson is naturally quite entangled. He didn't know whether this decision was good or bad to himself, to S.H.I.E.L.D., and to the S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick who trusted him. But now that I have done this step, I can only go on anyway. Hill didn't think much about this, she was just called by Nick suddenly. Recently, her mental state is not very good, and the problem with Nanjo has made her unable to concentrate. Nick naturally saw the situation of his subordinates, so this time, it can be regarded as taking her to relax, and then helping her get back to work. I need to talk to Stark personally about this matter. As a member of the Avengers Project, such a big thing has been concealed privately. As soon as these words were spoken, a trace of undetectable embarrassment appeared on Phil Coulson's face. Although Nick said Stark, it still applies to himself. This seems to be said to myself. If Nick knew, he would already know the true identity of Darkseid but would hide it. That's not the only thing Nick said. Maybe angry, disappointed, puzzled. After all, as Nick, one of the closest and most trusted people. If he didn't stand on his side, the blow to him must be very serious. Looking at Nick at the moment, looking out the window thinking about the problem, Phil Coulson's expression is complicated. And this slight detail was noticed by Hill. Hill is naturally very puzzled, definitely she can't think of the truth. Just think that there is a misunderstanding between Nick and Phil Coulson. She definitely couldn't think that now Phil Coulson will feel full of guilt every time he spends an extra second with Nick. Mr. Stark, Nick, Phil Coulson and Hill have arrived outside Stark's mansion. Seeing these three people, especially Nick standing in the middle, Stark was speechless. He and Nanjo are of the same type, and they don't go to the front door. This guy has appeared in his home since the night he said he was Iron Man. However, he is not the same as Nanjo. Nanjo avoided all monitoring and directly modified the JARVIS program. This person is very dangerous. Stark didn't like him. But now, strictly speaking, he is Stark's superior. As a member of the Avengers Project, Stark's head is the Nick in front of him. So even if he doesn't like Nick anymore, Stark will greet him with a smile. The person I sent just now has already arrived. Brought into the mansion by Stark, Nick asked. Stark nodded. Come here, ask me about the situation of the man named Darkseid. How? You, as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., you have to ask me. Stark's words made Nick a little embarrassed. In Stark's eyes, his knowledgeable question seemed like a fool. About Darkseid, I want to talk to you in person. Nick naturally didn't care about this embarrassment. He turned off the subject and continued. I don't think there is much to talk about. I have already told your people everything I know. Stark didn't think it was necessary. He already understood what he said. He didn't understand. What else do you want to know? I don't know his name, or what he looks like, let alone his contact information and address. What else do you think you can ask? Stark picked up the cup with chlorophyll and took 2 sips. Definitely, I know you know very little about this Darkseid, but you should have had a lot of communication with him. With that said, Nick stood up and came to Stark's side. Why don't we have a chat? What is the character of this Darkseid? Stark listened to Nick's words, thought about it a little, then tilted his neck. It's not a problem. Although we have only met a few times, I still know him a little bit. Stark knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. was investigating Nanjo's true identity. Although he helped Nanjo conceal his contact information, he was also curious about who this person really was. He also checked for a long time, but in the end nothing was found, so if S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to check, Stark will also give some help. This is the traditional middleman. No matter which party he is, he will help a little bit. In this way, Stark took the 3 of Nick into his studio, and the 4 of them sat down and began to analyze the character of this Darkseid. Naturally, Nanjo didn't know what happened. He had already boarded the plane back to New York. After a period of air travel, Nanjo returned to New York, and then hurried back to his residence. It was already midnight when I got home, and all 3 children were already asleep. Nanjo had to tiptoe back to the bedroom. Just closing the bedroom door, Nanjo suddenly thought of something, and immediately crept out of his bedroom and went to the garage downstairs. It has been a long time since I performed daily tasks. The last time the Hulk suffered a lot, he had lost a lot, and he had to make up for it. Soon after arriving in the garage, Nanjo didn't think much, and entered his own room built by Stark and Ethan, capable of releasing Omega radiation. The long-lost radiation exposure was still accompanied by severe pain, but it made Nanjo feel nostalgic for a while. I hope I don't have Stockholm. Nanjo also realized that there was something wrong with him, and while feeling the pain, he was also meditating in his heart. I don't know if it was because of the lack of radiation for a long time. Nanjo was a little sleepy after sitting here for a while. He was supposed to carry out the other items of the daily mission, but he fell asleep dazedly by leaning against the wall. When he opened his eyes again, the surrounding environment changed again. Nanjo looked around and found that this was not the original room, so he stood up abruptly. The first thought in his mind was that he might be dreaming again. Sure enough, although the surrounding area is no longer the emptiness in the previous nightmare, the light group is still there. An island appeared in this emptiness, and Nanjo was standing on this island. You met Dormammu and Ancient One, and both of them knew who you were. This time the light group is no longer any outsider. If it is expelled, it seems that it should be able to communicate. Who are you? Are you the god of the universe? Nanjo looked at the light group and asked. God. When the light group heard Nanjo's words, they even let out a sneer. I am above the gods, and all the gods in this universe fear me. Nanjo was a little surprised by the words of the light group. Although I don't know who this light group is, it's not a small tone to listen to him. You have changed a lot of things, and the incident can no longer proceed according to the set route. It's all because of you. The light group continued to speak. I don't want to change those things, but there is no way. After all, I also want to live. I don't know why I came here, but I have to live, right? Nanjo confronted the light group with a slightly angry tone and defended himself. You are sophistry. When Guangtuan reached Nanjo, he became even more angry, and his tone was much more serious than before. Since you came into this world, every move you made has changed this universe, this world, your existence is a mistake. When Nanjo heard this, he also shrugged. Then since I was a mistake, why did you quickly destroy me? I shouldn't be your opponent now. As soon as he said this, the light group fell into silence. Seeing this scene, Nanjo also secretly smiled. Then watch him continue to say. You can't destroy me now, is it because you can't do anything to me now? Although I don't know the specific reason, Nanjo was able to tell the reason for the silence of the light group. I am an existence beyond the gods, it is easy to make you disappear. Obviously, this light group was somewhat irritated by Nanjo's ridicule. Then you do what you say. Nanjo continued his ridicule, which made the light group even more angry. You will pay for your existence. As he said, the light of the light group instantly illuminated the entire void. Nanjo's vision was also filled with light, and he couldn't see anything clearly. Chapter 51. The light group emits a dazzling light, which obscures all of Nanjo's vision. And when the light dissipated, what caught Nanjo's eyes was boundless darkness. The dazzling light and boundless darkness suddenly alternated, making it difficult for Nanjo's eyes to adapt to everything in front of him. Time is short, after all kinds of crazy blinks, Nanjo adapted to the darkness. He found that he was actually in a cage, which was very huge, and he didn't know what huge amounts of creatures were being held. And under his feet is the water that wiped off his ankles. I don't know if it is caused by darkness or originally the color is like this, the water also looks black. Nanjo looked around, he didn't know where it was. But what is basically certain is that the reason why Nanjo is here is all because of the self-proclaimed Transcendence Light group. This prison is not only dark, but also cold and wet. If it is an ordinary human, it is likely to freeze to death in a short time. This cold definitely isn't a big deal to Nanjo. And he at the moment is watching in this dark prison. He didn't dare to relax his vigilance, because he didn't know what kind of terrifying creature was being held in this huge amounts of prison. Suddenly, Nanjo heard the sound of water being stirred not far in front of him. He did not rush forward, but walked forward slowly. Who are you? At this time, a female voice came from the darkness not far away. Nanjo watched intently and could see clearly with the help of the faint light. Not far away was a woman with a hot figure, a tight black dress and long black hair. The woman's wet black hair should be related to the dampness here and so much water. I broke here by mistake and want to know where it is. Nanjo couldn't see the face of the woman in front of her, so she didn't know who she was, so she could only ask. Inadvertently, the woman couldn't help laughing when she heard Nanjo's remarks. What you said is really lackluster. You can't come in here by accident. As soon as the voice fell, a dark shadow accompanied the woman's hand reaching Nanjo. Nanjo quickly escaped the blow, and he also saw what it was. Seeing the original appearance of the black shadow that was thrown, the corners of Nanjo's mouth rose slightly. He already knew who the man in front of him was. Say, who are you? Was it sent by Odin? There was no need for Nanjo to break, the woman said her identity by herself. She is the first child of Odin in the Marvel Universe, Hela, the goddess of death. And this huge amounts of prison was prepared for her and used to imprison her. No, I wasn't sent by Odin. Nanjo hurriedly waved, I have nothing to do with Odin. Do you think I will believe you when you say this? Hela gradually moved forward, and the faint light also made Nanjo see Hela's face clearly. Mature, enchanting, but very haggard. Being imprisoned here for thousands of years, even the goddess of death Hela will become very haggard. What I said is true, look at me, I am not from Asgard at all. Nanjo spread out his hands and conveyed any hostility to Hela in front of him. Hela stopped 10 steps away from Nanjo, squinted slightly, and stared at Nanjo carefully. This look made Nanjo a little uncomfortable, but in order not to cause trouble, Nanjo still let Hela watch it enough. You really are not from Asgard, are you from Earth? As the goddess of death, Hela can naturally see where Nanjo came from. And when she determined that Nanjo came from the Earth, she was also quite surprised. After all, the damp and cold here, even ordinary Asgard people, would undoubtedly die, not to mention the Earth people who are weaker than Asgard people. She didn't understand why Nanjo was safe and sound even standing in front of her so easily. But now it is clear that the point is not this, the point is how this person got here. You should know that this prison was built by Odin himself, except for Odin, no one else can enter. So Hela thinks Nanjo is really lying. Although he is an Earthling, he definitely has something to do with Odin. Otherwise, it is absolutely impossible for him to enter this prison. And Nanjo naturally saw that Hela was still very skeptical of herself. This makes Nanjo somewhat difficult. Now a god is staring at him eagerly, it is still very difficult to find his way back. Don't look at me with that look. I really have no hostility or malice towards you. I was not put in by Odin, I was put in by another existence. Who was the one who let you in? Hela asked when Nanjo's voice just fell. This question made it a little hard to handle, because he didn't know who the light group was. Nanjo smiled awkwardly. I don't know who that existence is. Hela's face was gloomy when he heard Nanjo's words, and he swiped it casually. The black spikes came straight to Nanjo. Upon seeing this situation, Nanjo also sighed, then turned sideways, and when the spike just brushed his body, he caught the spike directly with one hand. This operation stunned Hela. She knew that people who can stand here safe and sound are by no means idlers, even people on Earth. But she didn't expect Nanjo to take her spikes so easily. Although she was sealed and imprisoned, she was still very sure of her own strength. She felt that Nanjo could escape this trick, but she absolutely couldn't use it. What's your name? Hela knew that she needed to face the person in front of her. It's just that Nanjo didn't answer her question, but walked towards her quickly. This move made Hela a little confused, but instead of moving her feet, she looked directly at Nanjo to see what he wanted to do. Just watch. Nanjo came to Hela and handed the spike to Hela. This behavior made Hela a little surprised. She looked at Nanjo and didn't know what to say for a while. She has lived for more than 1,000 years, and this is the first time she has encountered such a situation. But she reached out and took the spike that Nanjo handed her. My name is Nanjo, you can also call me Darkseid. When Nanjo saw that Hela took the spike, he also smiled. Nanjo, Darkseid, why do you have two names? Hela was a little confused after hearing what Nanjo said, and asked. Both are my names. You call me the same thing. I don't care. You can call it whichever you like. Looking at Hela's face, Nanjo smiled slightly. He knows that after his actions just now, Hela has become less vigilant towards him. You mean, the guy you don't know who it is sent you here directly? Hela and Nanjo at the moment have sat on top of a dark, similar to a coffin. Definitely, it's just that Nanjo himself feels like a coffin. And Nanjo also summarized why he came here, and then told Hela. Hela was also a little surprised when he heard this. The strength of the person who was sent here in front of him is unfathomable. To enter here, you must have Odin's consent. And that existence bypassed Odin directly, and then sent Nanjo in, which is really incredible. That guy should not be weak. How did you provoke her? I don't know if it's a bit boring for Hela to be held for such a long time, and she is actually curious about Nanjo. And Nanjo just waved his hand. He didn't intend to tell the matter about himself as an outsider. The one who says he is superior to the gods, I don't know if he brags or is true. Hela felt a little ridiculous when Nanjo said that. Existence above the gods, he really dared to say. Faced with such remarks, Hela naturally dismissed it. But having ability to bypass Odin and send people here, the strength must be terrifying. Although Hela didn't want to admit it, but based on this alone, that person was indeed stronger than herself. You won't be like me, are you being said to be an unforgivable demon? Being sent here directly by that kind of powerful existence, in Hela's eyes, this person should be similar to himself, right? But unexpectedly Nanjo shook his head. I am not the same as you. You are the goddess of death, with countless souls under you, and I am a good law-abiding human on earth. I haven't done anything that hurts the world. Nanjo's words aroused Hela's disdain, and she didn't believe Nanjo's rhetoric. At this time, Nanjo also stood up from the big black coffin. He couldn't stay here anymore, he had to return to Earth. And Hela also saw through Nanjo's mind and sneered twice. I advise you to give up. If you can leave here easily, I would have left. Why should I stay here? Nanjo had already walked out of the black cage at this time. Outside the black cage, there was still darkness and black water, which was no different from the cage. On the contrary, the light outside the cage is darker than that inside the cage. Can't you get out of this cage? Nanjo looked at Hela and pointed to the black prison. I can definitely get out of here. After hearing Nanjo's words, Hela also got up and walked out of the prison. This prison is just a decoration. It is the dark dome that traps me. Hela pointed to the darkness above her head. This darkness is woven by the power of Odin invisible. I can't do anything about it. Nanjo looked at the dark dome, and he could feel that the darkness was woven by countless forces. In other words, can you leave here by breaking up the darkness? Hela nodded, but still did not forget to dampen Nanjo's confidence. It can be, but I don't think you can succeed. Hela naturally didn't think Nanjo had the ability to do this. After all, this was created by Odin's power. It is impossible for a human to break the boundaries of death creation. But Nanjo didn't think so much, he already had his own plan in his heart. Thinking of this, Nanjo concentrated his strength in his hands. Wanting to break this darkness is not a problem that can be solved with one hand. Just watch the blue energy begin to gather in Nanjo's hands. The light became stronger and stronger, and it had already shining on the surrounding darkness for several meters. Hela looked at Nanjo with some surprise, she could feel this powerful force. It is really surprising that a human being can possess such a powerful force. As the light appeared on Nanjo's hands, the huge amounts of energy began to oscillate, and the energy ripples also began to oscillate. Hela felt the shock, her face changed drastically, and her whole body instantly withdrew 3 steps backwards, pointing Nanjo with her finger, as if she wanted to say something. But Nanjo didn't care what she wanted to say. Raising her hands, the atomic breath burst out with all her strength, killing the darkness directly. As Hela said, there is indeed a barrier in the darkness, and the atomic breath gushes upwards, hitting the dark barrier. As soon as the two touched, the blue light of the atom's breath began to spread across the darkness. Immediately afterwards, I heard the sound of cracking. Suddenly, a huge force vented from the darkness, and the strong force directly shook Nanjo and Hela out. Then, looking at the dark dome, a big hole shattered, and sunlight once again appeared in the darkness of 1,000 years. Hela had completely forgotten what was just now, and stared at the sunshine in front of her blankly. This is the first time I have seen sunshine in thousands of years, the first time. Nanjo looked at the somewhat silly Hela and shook his hand in front of her eyes. Be more sober, are you planning to go out? Nanjo's words instantly awakened Hela, but it also made her very entangled. If she really leaves, then Odin will definitely know that she still has Odin's imprisonment on her body. Even in Asgard, she can't defeat Odin. In the end, facing Odin, he was either captured or killed. Only when Odin died, did she return to her true self. But the temptation of this light shocked Hela's nerves. She didn't want to stay here anymore, she wanted to leave this dark place. Seeing Hela was still struggling, Nanjo was also speechless for a while. You decide quickly, if you don't, I won't be able to get out. Hela didn't understand Nanjo's words and looked at him suspiciously. Upon seeing this, Nanjo also sighed. I can't fly naturally. These words made Hela couldn't help but laugh, then stepped forward and grabbed Nanjo's waist, and flew upwards as soon as he stood up. She has decided that she is going to leave here. But just as he flew out of the hole in the dark barrier, Hela suddenly felt a sharp pain in her body. This severe pain made it difficult for her to continue the flight, and she was sweating profusely and might faint at any time. Obviously, this is also Odin's handwriting. In order to keep Hela away from the darkness while he was alive, Odin set another seal on the dark barrier. As long as Hela leaves the barrier, the seal will appear on Hela, further weakening her strength. Seeing Hela was about to dizzy in pain, Nanjo panicked a little. He can't fly, and the only one that can fly has fallen. Doesn't that mean that Odin can catch turtles in the urn? At that time, he can only be regarded as an accomplice, and now the only way is to leave quickly. When Nanjo was a little anxious, a crack suddenly appeared behind him. A strong suction came through the crack, sucking him and Hela all in. Then the cracks merged and the two disappeared. Nanjo and Hela were sucked in by the crack and entered a passage that Nanjo could not explain clearly. The two are also in free fall in this passage. At this time, Hela had completely lost consciousness because of the pain of the seal, and she collapsed into Nanjo's arms. There is no way, Nanjo can only hold Hela in his arms. This falling feeling lasted for a long time, and then another suction came, and Hela in Nanjo's arms was instantly sucked away. This suction only works on Hela. Nanjo will not be affected by the suction at all. And just before Nanjo could react, he fell directly to the ground. The fall did not cause any harm to Nanjo. He looked around and found that this was the room where he released Omega radiation. Why am I naked? Nanjo looked around and noticed that he was naked. In fact, when he entered the Omega Ray room, Nanjo was originally unclothed, but when he saw the light group, he was actually dressed. It was the same when I saw Hela. And now returning to this room, Nanjo naturally changed back to the state without clothes. Nanjo quickly got up and turned off the equipment, and then walked out of the room. He was thinking about a question now, that is, where did Hela go? The suction took Hela straight away but didn't take herself away. Who did it on Earth? Odin. With these questions, Nanjo walked out of the room, but the scene outside the room stunned Nanjo. This is Hela. Outside the room, Hela, wearing a black tights, was lying just a short distance outside the room. His face was pale, and sweat beads could be seen clearly on his face. But what surprised Nanjo was that Hela lying here was even younger than he had seen before. The mature aura has been reduced by more than half, and she looks like a young girl now, which is very different from the aura just now. Because of Odin's seal, Nanjo didn't quite understand why this was, and naturally thought of Odin's seal. He is now dressed, looking at Hela who has fainted on the ground, lost in thought. He was thinking about how to arrange her. Staying by his side was a hidden danger. But after thinking about it for a while, Nanjo didn't think of any suitable arrangement. I could only pick him up, and then took her back to my home and put her on my bed. Don't let the 3 children know about Hela's existence. At least for now, don't let them know. After Nanjo put Hela on the bed, he had time to check the time. It was discovered that 2 hours had passed. It took only 2 hours from entering the Omega radiation room to holding Hela back to his bedroom. Looking at the moment Hela whose face was still ugly, Nanjo also sighed. It seems to have caused a lot of trouble for myself again. The day lighted up slowly, and it wasn't until the sun rose high that Hela slowly opened her eyes. Hela looked around and found that she was in an unfamiliar environment. So she had to be vigilant. Just thinking of getting up, a soreness is oncoming. As the goddess of death, no one except Odin seems to be able to cause her pain. Odin. Hela cursed a few words, then stood up, resisting the soreness. The surrounding decoration style makes Hela feel unfamiliar. She opened the door and heard some sounds. Walking to the source of the sound, Nanjo was sitting on the sofa watching TV. Woke up. Nanjo smiled slightly when he saw Hela's appearance. You can really sleep, it's already noon. Where am I? This is at my house. Nanjo responded. After hearing Nanjo's words, Hela looked around again. Suddenly, she saw a mirror, and she also saw her current face in the mirror. Why did I become so young? Hela was a little surprised, but she didn't expect to become so immature. Nanjo spread his hands, indicating that he didn't know either. Immediately afterwards, Nanjo told Hela what happened after breaking the dark barrier. Hela frowned upon hearing Nanjo's account. Listen to what you mean. Not only are there existences that want to destroy you, but there are also existences that secretly help you. Hela said, looking up and down Nanjo. Is it, outsider? Seeing Hela said this, Nanjo did not deny that he had used the atomic breath that was not under the law of the universe, and it was easy for Hela to infer his identity. No wonder you are targeted by that kind of existence. The appearance of an outsider will definitely make that kind of existence uncomfortable. I now believe that the existence you said is above the gods. Hela was not very polite, and sat directly on the sofa aside. You helped me out. I am very grateful for this, but you have to understand that now my disappearance will definitely be perceived by Odin, and you will be an accomplice by then. So don't expect me to give you anything in return. Registration now is our main thing. Hela didn't look at Nanjo at all, but looked at the TV in front of her and said casually. When Nanjo heard this, he also sighed. This trouble is really big. If you are not careful, you may have to work with Odin. Now I am definitely not Odin's opponent, even if Odin is old. However, Nanjo came to a conclusion after passing through the previous events. It is the high probability that one's own atomic breath can break any restriction seal in this universe. Because the atomic breath is not under the laws of the universe, the destructive power may be stronger in the face of different laws of the universe. What about you? Do you have such a plan? Nanjo looked at Hela and asked. Obviously he didn't think Hela would stay here. But Hela's words made Nanjo slap her face. I will stay here, and now I have not returned to Asgard's ability, so let's treat this as a place to settle down for the time being. Hela's words left Nanjo speechless for a while. Seeing this guy really doesn't plan to leave. You should have a lot of rooms in this house, just give me one. What Hela didn't know was that besides Nanjo, there were 3 children in this family. When Nanjo talked about the situation in his home, Hela said even more without thinking. This is easy, you sleep on the sofa, I sleep on the bed. Nanjo supported his forehead, he no longer expected Hela to take the initiative to leave. Good guy, I don't know what kind of arrogant file-size sister this is. At any rate, it is also the goddess of death, so I have to leave myself some noble temperament. This sentence, you sleep on the sofa and I sleep on the bed, is this what the goddess of death can say? Above the golden hall of Asgard, Odin sitting in that chair hall of gold, faced some ugly. He had the perception to have escaped imprisonment. Hela now know the earth. But let Odin think is incredible. Hela turned from forbidding places instantly to the earth directly, which in his view of things is absolutely impossible to release the. But the fact is, this thing actually took place. You know, Hela was being detained place, but very far from earth, even if there is Bifrost, they have to go through a 78 minutes awe. Hela but it is the moment to reach the earth, how it is not likely to think awe. It seems, we need to go to a trip to the earth. Odin at the moment got up. He has decided to go a trip to the earth, this thing he would personally address. Thor, Loki, Odin with guns in their hands and knocked on the floor. Time is not, Thor waving his hammer came to the hall, while Loki is panting behind him. Ha ha, Loki, this time as I won. Thor, proud to have tired of looking behind big breath of Loki, declared their own victory. When you have a hammer for an aid, you still feel very proud, right? Thor Loki white won, dismissive of his victory. At this time, Odin suddenly cough own voice. This cough twice instantly make Thor and Loki not continue to go loquacious, were both respectful standing in the middle of the hall, eyes to see Odin. The two of you to find, there is one thing to tell you. Odin looked up and down too, continued. I want to leave for some time, this time, which would be managed by the Asgard two of you. Odin word went out, Thor and Loki are surprised a moment, then looked at each other. Since the two of them grow up, Odin would rarely go out alone, leaving Asgard, there are also unavoidable war. What if there really cannot be avoided war, then Thor and Loki will stay by his side. So, after Odin say this, two people will feel very strange. You do not be surprised, I just need to solve some personal business, it will leave, and you manage to put the Asgard, but also want to see your leadership ability. Rest assured father, we will work hard. Loki took the lead this time opening. Thor also nodded. Odin see this scene, also smiled, then he went to the front too, and patted their shoulders. I believe you can manage Asgard, I hope I come back, Asgard or past this settled. Saying, Odin went over the middle too. He does not intend to put together something else, he should immediately go to the earth. Although Hela left the forbidding places when they are left to their own seal to the seal of. But even adding that seal, Hela's strength has not all been sealed to live, after she went to that of Earth, the planet is likely to be hurt, so he hurried to go to solve this matter. Odin while on the way to Earth, Hela boathouse is south to try new clothes. Hela had intended to stay in the south, the boat at home, and here is the earth, Hela this dress that was very noticeable. In order to make the integration, here are some more Hela south boat to buy some new clothes. And these are the Hela their own choosing. She is also a lot to clean his body. He began to look into the mirror at his new clothes. I thought you people who live in Asgard, aesthetic, and we will do some gaps. Earth, it seems, is no different. Looking at the clothes Hela bought back were indeed normal people's clothes. Nanjo was also a little surprised. And what he said, Hela's eyes were greeted. Upon seeing this, Nanjo waved his hand and said that he would not continue to speak. But I didn't expect that the garments on your planet are now pretty good. Although it is not as good as Asgard, it really makes me shine. Hela fiddled with the shorts she bought and spoke. You don't even look at this thing for less money. This time it was Nanjo's turn to roll his eyes. After Hela got these clothes, it cost him close to $5,000 or $6,000. The shorts on Hela alone cost $400. Although it seems to cost only a few dollars, they are sold under luxury brands. With that said, Nanjo took out the evidence from the bag on the side, and it was also distressed for a while. Although he was already a major shareholder of Stark Industries, the spending of the money really made Nanjo's heart drip with blood. And while Hela was still admiring her beauty, she suddenly stopped moving. Immediately afterwards, her face became a little gloomy. Just watch. Hela turned her head and looked at Nanjo and said, "Our trouble is here." Upon hearing this, Nanjo was a little puzzled. What's the trouble? Odin is here. Hela can feel the breath of Odin. Odin at the moment has come to Earth and is nearby. He could come suddenly, and it must have been done by Bifrost. It seems that the one who should be here is coming. Then what do you do? Run, Nanjo asked at this time. Run, Hela sneered twice. How can I run with my current strength? As he said, Hela sat down beside Nanjo. I just stay here, waiting for him to come. Looking at Hela at the moment, Nanjo was also speechless for a while. This Hela, it seems that she really intends to tie her to herself. When Odin comes, I will say you rescued me, and you are also an accomplice. Hela can be shrewd. She knew that she had no chance of defeating Odin at all, so she took Nanjo to deal with Odin. Nanjo has the ability to break Odin's confinement, and Hela also believes that Nanjo has the ability to deal with Odin. Although he is the goddess of death, he still needs to count on others, which makes Hela very unhappy. But now this situation can't help Hela think more about it. She didn't want to go back to the darkness, so she didn't plan to catch it all. She wants to try it. And as time passed, Hela's expression became more and more serious. This shows that Odin is getting closer. Nanjo looked at Hela's expression. He understood that Hela was really afraid of Odin, otherwise he wouldn't be nervous like this. And just when the atmosphere in the house became more and more serious, the door of Nanjo's house was knocked. He's here, right outside the door. Hela looked solemn and looked at the knocked door. He didn't break in directly, but knocked on the door, which I didn't expect. Nanjo at the moment has got up, and is about to walk towards the door of the house. At this moment, Hela grabbed his arm. The hand that was originally cold, at the moment, there was still a slight tremor. It seems that Hela is already afraid of Odin now. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Nanjo didn't know what to say, so he could only comfort him like this. I don't know if Nanjo's words are really magical, or whether Hela has become firm and ready to face Odin. Regardless of the reason, Hela gave it away in the end. Nanjo smiled slightly when he saw this, then walked to the door and opened the door. Outside the door, a kind-faced white-haired old man with a blindfold was standing there, looking at Nanjo with a smile. Hello, I'm sorry to disturb you. Nanjo also responded with a smile, and didn't mean to pretend to be him. Instead, he stepped forward and let Odin in. Odin was a little surprised to see Nanjo doing this, and even a picture of whether there was a trap flashed in his mind. But in the end Odin walked in, because from Nanjo's face, he couldn't see any hostility. Walking into Nanjo's home, Odin found Hela sitting on the sofa. Although her expression was relaxed, Odin could tell at a glance that she was nervous. Hela. Odin walked towards Hela slowly, and was quite surprised to see Hela getting younger. But he also immediately thought of it, maybe because of the seal, Hela's appearance had changed back to when he was young. I didn't expect the seal to have such power, which surprised Odin. It suddenly occurred to him that Thor's mother had been complaining, hoping to be younger, which seemed to be the way. But at this moment, Hela stood up directly and stepped back. Odin knew that if it were the former Hela, the moment he might see him, it would be razed to the ground. But now Hela's power has been sealed off. Although it is not weak, it is definitely not strong. Relax, I am not hostile. Seeing his daughter so jealous in front of him, Odin said calmly. But obviously, Odin's words had a counterproductive effect. Not only did not make Hela put down her vigilance, but also made her more guarded against herself. I said, you can't sit down. At this time, Nanjo's voice sounded behind Odin. Sit down and talk peacefully. I advise you not to think about doing it at my house, understand? Nanjo didn't plan to intervene in this matter. Although Hela tried his best to pull himself into the water, Nanjo knew very well that if he participated in this matter, it would become even more troublesome. No matter what Odin's plan is, as long as he doesn't do it here, everything else is easy to say. Nanjo's words made Odin smile again, and then he sat on the sofa first. How about this? This is for Hela. Odin made this move to show Hela that he did not have any hostility. Seeing this, Hela raised her head and looked at Nanjo, and found that Nanjo was not looking at herself at all, and she was a little dissatisfied, but still sat down. Hela's move was seen by Odin, and he also looked in the direction of Nanjo, as if he understood something. I didn't expect you to leave the place of imprisonment when I was still alive. Odin stroked his beard while speaking, then looked at Hela. Does it have anything to do with the young man who opened the door? Hela looked at Nanjo again. She noticed that there was a slight pause in Nanjo's movements this time, smiled secretly in her heart, and then pointed her finger to Nanjo. Yes, this guy saved me, but he bypassed your perception and went straight into the dark place of imprisonment. Odin was also surprised when he heard this. Although he had guessed this for a long time, he still didn't believe it. Because this universe has not yet been able to bypass his perception and enter that imprisoned place. How did this young man do it? Young man, is it convenient to talk? Odin at the moment got up and asked Nanjo. Excuse me to refuse. Nanjo refused quickly. Don't involve me in the problem between your father and daughter. I also entered the place unintentionally. It is also the trend of the situation to save her. Just don't take me with you. Nanjo has become entangled with Hela. He doesn't want to become entangled with Odin too much. This time the existence sent itself to the place where Hela was imprisoned, and next time I don't know where it will be. So before he becomes stronger, he still shouldn't be too ostentatious. Odin was even more surprised when Nanjo didn't talk too far. The breath of this young man felt strange to Odin, but he couldn't tell what was strange. And he would not doubt Hela's remarks. As the goddess of death, Hela's self-esteem is quite high. She would not tell lies about being saved by others in order to divert attention. Therefore, the young man in front of him really bypassed his perception and saved Hela. It seems that this earth is now a hidden dragon and a crouching tiger. Odin couldn't help but sigh at this moment. It is indeed not easy for such a character to appear even on the earth nowadays. With that, Odin put his gaze on Hela again. Just now Nanjo said that he will not intervene in this matter, so it means that he will definitely not interfere with any decision made by Odin. Hela, I now give you two options. 1. Take the initiative to go back with me, and 2. Be forcibly taken back by me. Odin would not just leave Hela on the earth, and Hela is still a hidden danger to the earth. Although her strength has been greatly weakened, it can still cause harm to the earth. I reject. Hela also refused quite decisively. I won't go back to that dark place again. I won't be a victim of your whitewashing history. As Hela said, her tone became more and more angry. Her black tights also appeared on her body in an instant, and her hair turned into the shape of spider feet. I finally left that cold, damp, dark place. Now want me to go back? You dream. Although Hela is afraid of Odin, at this moment, for Odin, Hela is more angry and hateful. This man who sacrificed his daughter in order to whitewash his own history is not worthy of being that great god king. Now that Asgard has its current status, Hela believes that he has contributed to it. But how did Odin treat his meritorious officials? The anger of injustice, the anger of imprisonment, all kinds of anger come together. Even if countless powers have been sealed, Hela will never lose to Odin again. The atmosphere suddenly became tense, which made Nanjo on the side quite speechless. If you don't do anything, I'm afraid your home may not be spared. Seeing that Hela had already made a fighting posture in anger, Odin's face finally turned gloomy. We used to gallop in the universe, no one is our opponent, but you only took the 9 kingdoms and then stopped. Why, are you kind? Hela looked at Odin mockingly. Just because my ambition is bigger than you, I want the whole universe of comrades instead of the small 9 kingdoms. What can you do in that position? It's ridiculous. Hela's words made Odin's face gloomy a lot. And Hela gradually became hysterical. Hela, you have been imprisoned for so long, it really hasn't changed at all. Although Odin had a sullen face, his tone was calm, but it was also mixed with disappointment. Nanjo looked at Odin and Hela at the moment. He always had a bad feeling. He felt that the two of them were likely to fight directly. Change? I can't change. I have contributed so much to the kingdom and Asgard, but what did I suffer in the end? It is imprisonment in the darkness. I hate everything you do to me. I knew that. Why should I fight for Asgard? Hela's rebuke and Hela's resentment made Odin a little embarrassed. In any case, he is also the king of gods, he is Odin, the supreme man of Asgard, but he is so reprimanded. Even if the person who scolds him is his own daughter, it is difficult for him to accept. There was a lot of energy on Odin's body, and there was also a hint of coldness in his eyes. The cups on the coffee table beside the two of them had already begun to tremble. Nanjo saw this and immediately stood up. Don't forget what you promised me. Nanjo came to the middle of the two, his eyes also brought a hint of dissatisfaction. If you want to fight, just leave here to fight, do it here, absolutely not. Seeing Nanjo stood up, Odin also stopped his departure in time. But the eyes looking at Hela were still cold. Hela, I advise you to take the initiative to go back with me, you know. Don't wait until I force you back. This is Odin's ultimatum, and Hela can already feel Odin's anger. If she continues to refuse, then Odin is likely to ignore Nanjo's words directly, and then force Hela to attack here. But Hela glanced at Nanjo, and she had a plan in her heart. Seeing that she shook her head again. I still won't go back with you. If you want me to go back, there is no door. I would rather die here today than never go back with you. Hela's words were very tough, which made Odin even more angry. I saw a cloud of cold air on Odin's hand, and he wanted to freeze Hela directly, and then resisted to leave. But suddenly, Nanjo's figure appeared in front of him and grabbed Odin's air-conditioned hand. I told you that I'm not allowed to do anything here, and I won't dare to hurt my family at all. But how could Odin listen to Nanjo's words at this moment? He just wanted to take away the Hela in front of him so that he could not harm the earth. He believes that even if Hela no longer has its original strength, it is still hard to find an opponent on the earth when it starts. This young man, I hope you don't challenge my bottom line. If I destroy your home, I will compensate you. Asgard's treasures can be adjusted by you. Today, I absolutely took Hela away. Odin's attitude made Nanjo even more unhappy, and he held Odin's hand harder. I don't want to say the same thing a second time, so I hope you understand. Odin was also irritated by Nanjo's attitude. Only a human being on Earth, he even pointed at himself. In addition to being angry, Odin just wants to fly directly out of Nanjo's home. But when Nanjo used his force, Odin didn't fly out, but was restrained by Nanjo. It's not so easy to want to leave. Nanjo would not allow Odin to give out his home. If he attacked his home outside, let alone lose a house. When Shield asks, his identity will not be preserved. Seeing that Nanjo's hands were also containing energy, the atomic breath was also ready to threaten Odin at any time. He didn't know how much damage to Odin would be caused by his full atomic breath, but he always had to give it a try. Odin also felt the energy aura on Nanjo's body, he was even thinner and ate, and then looked directly at Nanjo. Where did you come from such power? Obviously, Odin also understood that this power is not under the law of the universe, so he also realized that Nanjo is not an ordinary person. Where did I come from? You don't need to worry. What you need to care about is not to hurt my house. Odin at the moment did not dare to ignore Nanjo anymore, because this force had already made him pay enough attention to Nanjo. The level of attention even far exceeds that of Hela. You either persuade Hela to leave now, or leave by yourself. If you dare to destroy this place, don't blame me for being ruthless. Nanjo didn't know if he would really defeat Odin, but he was sure that if he tried his best to face such an old Odin, Nanjo could make him pay a tragic price. On the other hand, Odin stared at Nanjo, and for a long while, he looked back at Hela. He knew that it was Hela's plan for him and Nanjo to be so arrogant. Your calculations are pretty accurate. Odin shook his hand and broke free from the wrist that Nanjo was holding. Then he gave a cold snort. Hela, don't think you will be safe and sound after this time. I will definitely seal you up again in the future. With that, Odin's gaze stayed on Nanjo's body. Compared to Hela, it was obvious that the boy in front of him was more concerned. Boy, I remember you. You are really special. If you are really what I think, then you have to pay attention. You are in a lot of danger. Nanjo also smiled when he heard this. Don't worry, I'm going through a lot of dangers, or I won't be sent to the place where you imprisoned your daughter. After hearing Nanjo's words, Odin snorted again. Obviously, this time because he was aware of Nanjo's identity, he gave up on arresting Hela. He is going back to Asgard. Odin at the moment has walked out of Nanjo's home and closed the door politely. Watching Odin go, Nanjo looked back at Hela. Your strategy is a bit vicious. Odin left, and Hela's first crisis was lifted. Definitely, the relief of the crisis depends entirely on Hela making Nanjo and Odin tense. And what allowed Hela's strategy to succeed was Nanjo's desire to protect his own home. Your trick is very bad. Nanjo at the moment has sat back on the sofa. It seems that his cup has not been broken by the energy emitted by Odin. Definitely Nanjo is not a fool. He naturally knows Hela's strategy, but in order to survive his house, he is also willing to be used by Hela. However, to retreat Odin, it also relied on Nanjo's momentum. Odin also understood that Nanjo could not defeat himself at all, but Nanjo gave Odin a kind of one. Even if he can't defeat you, I will leave you with an aura of miserable waiting. This kind of aura made Odin hesitation. He was still worried that he would be seriously hurt if his two sons were not able to take on the responsibility. So he left. If you don't lose a little bit, how can you make a move? Hela sat beside Nanjo and said with a smile. After this time, Odin should not be here for a long time. You can rest assured of this. Hela said, looking at Nanjo's face. Are you sure you can rest assured that I, a heinous man, is at home? Didn't you say that there are 3 children in the family? Upon hearing this, Nanjo snorted coldly. If it were you before, with all your strengths, I would definitely not let you stay here, but now you. Nanjo turned his head and looked up and down Hela. Now you, I can have full confidence to ensure that I can defeat you. Hela couldn't help rolling her eyes when she heard this. But this is true. If Hela is in the heyday, Nanjo can't guarantee that he can really defeat her. If he is in Asgard, Nanjo will inevitably fail. After all, Hela is invincible in Asgard. But now this Hela, who can't go back to Asgard at all, is still a Hela who has been sealed with more than half of his strength. Nanjo is very confident. The 3 children shouldn't suggest one more person in the family. After all, this house belongs to me. I am responsible for their schooling, and I am responsible for their legal status, so they won't have any opinions. Nanjo said, at the moment has stood up. According to the time, the 3 children are already coming back. Sure enough, time was short, and the sound of unlocking the door of Nanjo's house came, and 3 children came in from outside the door. The first time they entered, all 3 of them saw Nanjo, and then they noticed Hela on the sofa. The beautiful face and the indescribable unique charm made both Wanda and Lorna feel bad. After seeing the 3 children, Hela smiled and beckoned. She also keenly noticed the changes in the expressions of the 2 girls. This person is a friend of mine, and will be catching up here for a while recently. Nanjo looked at the suspicious 3 people and quickly explained. After Hela heard this, she was speechless for a while. Even saying that he is his distant cousin is more reliable than saying that he is a friend. Sure enough, as soon as Nanjo said this, both Wanda and Lorna's expressions changed, and they cast a secret glance at Nanjo. Hello, my name is Hela, I hope we can get along in harmony. Hela tried to show her kindness, but making this expression made her feel sick. She is also the goddess of death, and now she is going to show such a disgusting smile to the 3 children. She also didn't expect that she would be able to drop the price like this one day. Nanjo rushed the 3 children to the house to complete the homework assigned by the teacher. And Hela approached behind Nanjo. I don't know what your Earth looks like, but in Asgard, it is illegal to have a relationship with a minor. Nanjo naturally understood what Hela meant, and said angrily, I know what you mean, don't worry, in most countries on the Earth, it is illegal to have relations with minors. Can you not think of me like that? Hela was the second person to think of Nanjo like this, and the first was Phil Coulson. Hela couldn't help but smile when he heard this. This laughter didn't even look like a goddess of death, and it made Nanjo a little surprised. Don't worry, I just tease, you don't need to be so nervous. The more Hela laughs, the happier, maybe because Nanjo, who has always been a strategizing image, can also show such an expression, or it may be because this thing is really interesting. The 3 children of at the moment have returned to the bedroom to complete their few homework. However, the atmosphere of at the moment is a bit strange. Pietro didn't even dare to make any loud noises, for fear that Wanda and Lorna would be able to tear themselves apart. And Wanda and Lorna at the moment are writing homework, definitely their writing strength is quite big, there seems to be some resentment. I definitely have a grievance. I didn't expect that there would be such a beautiful and charming woman in the family. The appearance of this woman gave the 2 children a sense of crisis. Originally, the existence of Sharon made them worth watching, but the appearance of this person made them feel the crisis of huge amounts of. In front of this woman, Sharon was not worth mentioning. Both Wanda and Lorna had to admit that the charm of this woman almost fell over them. Pietro naturally understood their intentions, so he dared not speak loudly. I thought it was a war between the 2 of them and Sharon, but I didn't expect another person to be added now. The tripod has become a super strong. Pietro, as an outsider, feels very nervous. The 2 kids seem very interesting to you, you should pay attention. Outside the bedroom, Nanjo and Hela were chatting, and Hela also mentioned this matter. Seeing that Hela mentioned this topic again, Nanjo wanted to say something, but couldn't say anything, so he could only sigh. Okay, I won't make fun of you anymore. Hela also shut up, and stopped going on this topic. Nanjo also felt a little surprised when he looked at Hela at the moment. Although her hands were covered with blood and the goddess of death, Odin had to seal her existence. But after spending this time with her, Nanjo felt that the goddess of death was not so terrifying and dangerous. On the contrary, it is like an ordinary person with outstanding appearance. She now has nothing to do with the title of goddess of death. Asgard, inside the Golden Hall, Odin was sitting on the golden seat, his face a little gloomy. Thor and Loki, who stood in the middle of the hall, looked at each other, their eyes full of doubts. Since his father left Asgard and returned, the whole person has become like this. It seems that there is a lot of worry, and he has been frowning and thinking about something. They also asked Odin what was going on, but Odin kept silent all the time. Naturally, the 2 brothers couldn't figure out what happened. Odin was thinking about Nanjo's problem, not Hela's problem. Obviously, in Odin's view, Nanjo's situation is more serious than Hela's. Having power that does not belong to the law of this universe is enough to prove that this person comes from another universe, and that universe, like them, possesses various multi-universes. According to Nanjo, he was sent to the place where Hela was imprisoned. The strength of a person who can do all this without being discovered by himself must not be underestimated. That existence must have also known Nanjo's true identity. If possible, Odin really wants to talk to that existence. Now it seems that Hela's affair can only come to an end. This guy seems to be determined to be a Siamese baby with Nanjodang. Because the person next to Hela is Nanjo, Odin dare not act rashly. This person from another universe, another time and space, Odin didn't know anything about him, so naturally he didn't dare to provoke him at will. However, based on previous contacts, that person would not allow Hela to sabotage everywhere. As long as someone can restrain Hela, Odin can actually close one eye. It's really unlucky. Odin couldn't help but cursed, and this sentence made Thor and Loki even more puzzled. Their father really became weird, and they didn't know why. On the other hand, on Earth, it was another school day for the three children, and Nanjo was practicing in the room in the garage where the Omega radiation was released. 5 hours passed in a flash, and Nanjo walked out of the garage in sweat. After a simple wash of his body, Nanjo put on his clothes, and Hela also walked in from the garage. Hela wanted to come to the garage with Nanjo, but was strongly opposed by the latter, and then waited 5 hours outside before entering. She also walked into the room with Omega radiation curiously, and she could feel the residual Omega radiation in the room. This energy is very strong. Hela was a little surprised. She didn't dare to imagine that this was researched by the people on Earth. If you are exposed to radiation, you will definitely not get better. But the cultivation method of Nanjo in front of him was to enter such radiation and be irradiated for a full 5 hours. At the moment, Nanjo also took a sigh of relief. After such a long time, he finally completed his new daily mission. Now that my own 6% Darkseid template inheritance degree, there is definitely no rival to the Earth. But now that he is placed in the universe, it might not be worth seeing. Not to mention whether he can defeat Hela in his heyday. If he is in Asgard, even the old Odin would have to hang him up and fight. So Nanjo now wants to strengthen his daily task completion. Strive to achieve a 10% succession template before the next big event. Nanjo had already returned home, and Hela followed like a bugger. Just as Odin said, Hela really turned her and Nanjo into conjoined babies. After all, Hela is not sure when Odin will come here again, so there is absolutely nothing wrong with following Nanjo. But in this way, how can there be the appearance of the goddess of death? That was the goddess of death who was covered with countless blood, countless lives, and the sight of a person could be confusing. In this way, there really is no such thing as a goddess of death. But not long after Nanjo returned home, his phone rang. Stark, looking at the caller ID on the phone, Nanjo was a little surprised. It's this guy again. Do you still need to collect any data for yourself? With such a question, Nanjo answered the phone. Hey, there is good news, I think you will like it. Stark's voice came from the other side of the phone. What good news? The clothes are finished. Yes, after my hard work day and night, your clothes were finally made by Ethan and I. Stark's tone was full of pride, and he seemed to think that completing this task in just a few days was very worthy of celebration. Okay, I see, I'll go and get your clothes back now. Nanjo was also very surprised that Stark could be so fast. Yes, I have to remind you, you must be careful when you come. Now the people from S.H.I.E.L.D. will wander outside my house from time to time, and it's you. Stark's words made Nanjo frown slightly. The general situation Phil Coulson had already told him, but the degree of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s persistence made him a little helpless. These people just believed that they would go to the Starks' house, so they sent additional staff. If they blocked Nanjo, they would earn money. Okay, I see, I will bypass them. Nanjo hung up after speaking. Just watch him look back at Hela. I'm going away for a while, you can stay at home for a while. I don't plan to take Hela when I go to Stark's Nanjo. It's still very troublesome to take her. Hela shook her head when she heard this. No, I want to go with you too. What should I do if Odin comes and takes him away forcibly while Nanjo is away? In order to prevent such a thing from happening, Hela will never let Nanjo act alone. She was going to be a follower, following Nanjo all the time. I will be in trouble if you go. Nanjo wouldn't let Hela follow him all the time. If he takes Hela to Stark's house this time, then if he wants to go to Dr. Pym's laboratory, Hela will follow. At that time, I really can't get rid of this follower. At least until Hela lifted the seal, he might have to pester Nanjo. This is not what Nanjo wants to see, so he must let Hela stay at home. Hela, who he knew, was worried that Odin would suddenly visit him while he was away. But Nanjo believes that this probability is already very small, and she can stay at home with peace of mind. The most important thing is that I can also help myself bring up 3 children to promote feelings or something. When the time comes, there will be an extra free nanny at home. Isn't this a blood profit? Nanjo got off the plane. He no longer knew this was the first time he had visited Stark's house. Before getting on the plane, Nanjo made Hela stay at home through various analysis of pros and cons, and he came to California by himself. This time, he still went straight to Stark's house, but Nanjo still kept an eye on it. Nanjo stopped 3 kilometers away from Stark's house. He chose to walk for the next journey, watching the people around him as he walked. According to the urine of S.H.I.E.L.D., it is absolutely impossible for them to arrange manpower at the door of Stark's house. They will definitely arrange manpower in various places along the way, and then observe the surrounding people. Sure enough, not far in front of Nanjo, a man in a hoodie and peaked cap caught Nanjo's attention. Based on the working experience in S.H.I.E.L.D. for such a long time, Nanjo can easily determine that this person is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nanjo walked past him, and the man raised his head and glanced at Nanjo, then lowered again. At the moment, Nanjo was wearing a mask, and the breath he radiated was harmless to humans and animals, so the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent didn't care about Nanjo. So Nanjo left him very easily. He also saw several S.H.I.E.L.D. agents along the way. They are like sentry posts, there will be one after a certain distance. In order to find me, so much effort was made. Nanjo felt a little surprised. It seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. is serious this time. Since the events in New York some time ago, S.H.I.E.L.D. seems to have strengthened their investigations. Now that they have seized the breakthrough of Stark, they will naturally not let it go. However, all these investigations and the placement of personnel are of no avail in Nanjo's view. After all, if you want to catch yourself, relying on these agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still not good. They wouldn't even notice Nanjo, so how can they find out? In short time, Nanjo had already walked to the vicinity of the Stark mansion. He found a hidden corner, turned his clothes over, and his pants were the same. As a 10th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nanjo has always adhered to the principle that two-sided clothing is the most convenient way to disguise. As long as there is a change in clothing, Nanjo can sneak in perfectly. And this time, in order to enter Stark's house, he prepared in the same way. The S.H.I.E.L.D. outside the Stark mansion has a lot more manpower than those on the street, almost 3 steps per post and 5 steps per guard. But this is still not difficult for Nanjo. It's just that he cleverly used all the agent's blind spots to quietly walk into Stark's mansion. Relying on his skilled cracking skills, Nanjo walked in through a small door of the mansion. There is no S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in the mansion. As soon as Nanjo walked out of the utility room where the small door was located, he ran into Pepper Potts head-on. Ah! The sudden appearance of Nanjo shocked Pepper and couldn't help but let out a scream. Nanjo quickly covered Pepper's mouth with his eyesight. You know, Pepper's screaming is very easy to attract the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent outside the door, and he doesn't want to be caught in a urn. Don't be nervous, it's me. Nanjo comforted Pepper, which stabilized her emotions. It's true that you won't go to the front door once, do you? Pepper gave Nanjo a white look, obviously dissatisfied with each time Nanjo did not go through the main entrance. But she was helpless, after all, she was used to it. Sister, now all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are squatting outside, just to let me catch me. Do you think I can go to the front door? Isn't that asking for trouble? Nanjo's words also made Pepper a long sigh. How could she not know what Nanjo said? Since the arrival of the people from S.H.I.E.L.D., these people have stayed nearby. Although they will not interfere with Stark's normal life and the company's operations. But Pepper felt uncomfortable inexplicably. After all, this is the feeling of being watched. Except for some people with special hobbies, no one would want to be monitored by themselves. Stark and Ethan are in the basement now. Go ahead. Pepper waved her hand. She still had things to do, but she didn't have the idle time to chat with Nanjo. Nanjo nodded, and walked quickly to the basement, where Ethan and Stark were indeed there. Isn't it discovered? Seeing Nanjo's arrival, Stark asked. Do you think I can stand here safe and sound if I am discovered? The S.H.I.E.L.D. people are eager to take me away quickly, but they won't give me a chance to enter the basement. Nanjo's words made Stark and Ethan both smile. And Ethan also walked to a place covered with cloth. You can be optimistic, I am still very satisfied with our work. As he said, Ethan opened the cloth cover. Under the cloth cover was a glass cabinet, and inside the glass cabinet was a red and black personal armor. Nanjo was also quite surprised when he saw the suit in front of him. He didn't expect this thing to be so handsome after it was built. Nanjo stepped forward, and Ethan also opened the glass cabinet with interest. Nanjo touched the texture of the clothes. What is certain is that this is very portable and will not cause damage to Nanjo's movement. This thing now has a flaw. Stark spoke at this moment. It's a problem with my armor. It's not convenient to store. If there is any device that can make it smaller instantly, but we don't have that kind of technology. Stark's words reminded Nanjo of the capsules of Keelongzuli Capsule Company and the nanotechnology that Stark will master in the future. In other words, I can only put this dress in my house, and then what big thing happened? I was wearing it. Nanjo asked at the moment. And his words were approved by Stark, and Stark nodded. It's almost what it means, but you can rest assured that I will give you a lifetime after-sales service for this thing. As long as I innovate any new technology, your clothes will also be upgraded. Stark was much more sincere, and Nanjo was quite surprised when he said this. Okay, try it. If it doesn't fit, I have to change it. Nanjo nodded, took off the personal armor, then went to a corner in the basement, covered himself up, and then began to change clothes. Can this thing defend against my skills? Probably not. While changing clothes, Nanjo asked. Not yet, but it can offset a lot of power. Stark responded at this moment. As far as defense is concerned, don't worry, I am produced by Stark. It must be a boutique. This close-fitting armor still fits quite well, and Nanjo feels very satisfied when he wears it, but Nanjo feels a bit regretful for the inconvenience to carry. And it's still a bit difficult to send this thing back to New York. Definitely all of this can't be troublesome to Stark. As the person in charge of Stark Industry, although S.H.I.E.L.D. is semi-monitoring him, they have no right to interfere with the operation of Stark Industry. Randomly, the clothes were regarded as equipment of Stark Industries, and without any doubt, they were loaded and taken out of the mansion by Stark. This thing will now be airlifted to New York, and finally Nanjo will accept it. All this went so smoothly, Nanjo didn't even worry about it. So I have to say that the after-sales service of Stark Industries is really strong. One of the reasons for becoming the largest weapons supplier is that there must be after-sales. Nanjo left by plane again with peace of mind. This tossing back and forth made Nanjo a little irritable. Whenever I can fly, I can save a lot of time. But obviously this is difficult to achieve. For Nanjo's requirements for lightness, Stark did not install any flight function on this armor, so flight can only rely on the improvement of inheritance to develop new skills or win a lottery. However, the lottery of this system is really tasteless. Although Nanjo has obtained a bug skill such as atomic breath, Nanjo's impression of it is much better, but this is also the stage from bad reviews to more bad reviews. After returning to New York, Nanjo calmly waited for the arrival of the clothes. During this period of time, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. has really forgotten his level 10 agent, and no one has given him orders. If it wasn't for Phil Coulson, he still had some contact with him, otherwise he would have forgotten that he was still a 10th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And looking at the timetable on the calendar, Nanjo also realized that the appointment with Hill was approaching. Since he got the template of Darkseid, his relationship with Hill has become more and more estranged. This is not something Nanjo wants to see, so he will ask Hill to have a meal when Peggy wakes up. This is the most direct and effective way to resolve misunderstandings. Talk in person. So after Nanjo returned to New York, he went straight to Washington. After all, Stark sent the clothes a few days before returning. Nanjo didn't have to worry about the problem that no one would accept the clothes. When Nanjo arrived in Washington, it was already daytime, and this day was the day Nanjo and Hill agreed. Nanjo also confirmed the meeting place with her, and went straight there. When Nanjo arrived there, he found Hill was wearing a black suit and holding a helmet in his hands. It seemed that he had been riding a motorcycle. Hi, Nanjo came to Hill's side and waved to her. Hill also smiled slightly. Where are we going? Nanjo touched his chin, and then noticed the movie poster on the huge advertising space on the side of the tall building. Why, look at this. Hill also looked at the poster, and then nodded. You seem to be free lately. On the way, Hill said, now at the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D., you can hardly be seen. It's really free now. I watch TV and exercise at home every day. It's also very good. It's the life I like. After hearing Nanjo's words, Hill showed a jealous expression. You were really good. I went to Stark's house with Nick some time ago, for the sake of the man called Darkseid. Hill said, telling the story of Nick's visit to Stark's house some time ago, and even said that he thought there was some friction between Nick and Phil Coulson. As soon as these words came out, Nanjo immediately understood what was going on. This Phil Coulson. Nanjo also complained about it. As a top agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil Coulson's actions are really unreliable. Fortunately, Hill did not speculate close to the truth. It seems that Nanjo needs to remind Phil Coulson. Hill continues to complain about his work. This person with calm and serious characteristics in S.H.I.E.L.D. will show this in front of Nanjo. Although it is said that this date is to resolve the misunderstanding, it seems that the misunderstanding between the two is really not that big. Even if there is, they don't seem to mind. The two have come to the cinema, and after buying the tickets, they also entered the cinema. As a popular literary film, the attendance rate of this movie is quite terrifying, and Nanjo and Hill are also fortunate to buy the middle position. Seeing the entanglement between the hero and heroine, Hill fell silent. Nanjo. After a long while, Hill tugged at the corner of Nanjo's clothes. What's wrong? Hill's move surprised Nanjo a little. I'm really sorry for what happened before. What Nanjo didn't expect was that Hill actually spoke first. I know, my waywardness, my temper have caused you harm, everything before, I'm sorry. What Hill said was naturally Peggy's thing before, because Nanjo wanted to solve the problem by herself, which gave Hill a feeling of being abandoned, so she would be furious. Even if Nanjo really wakes up Peggy afterwards, Hill still doesn't want to lower his head. After this period of calm thinking, Hill naturally realized her mistake. She was too self-willed, which not only hurt herself, but also hurt Nanjo. The movie at the moment is showing a critical and touching moment. With this atmosphere, Hill also mustered up the courage to say this. Actually, I am also wrong. I should be more direct. Nanjo looked at Hill at the moment and found her head down, like a child waiting to be reprimanded. Nanjo couldn't help but comfort. Hill didn't speak, still lowered his head. Just watch Nanjo stretch out her hand and rubbed her hair. Don't do this, it's also the top agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. How can there be such a top agent? Nanjo's words made Hill raise his head, but there was a little grievance in his eyes. I am not an agent now, I am now on vacation, and I am not an agent during vacation. Not only was there a hint of grievance in his eyes, but also in his tone of voice, Nanjo couldn't help but want to laugh. It may also be because of the increasing work pressure, which caused Hill to have more and more small emotions, which also led to the unpleasantness that happened before the two. Well, after watching the movie, I will take you to eat delicious food, and you can relax today. Nanjo looked at Hill and grinned suddenly. The misunderstanding and unhappiness between the two seemed to disappear at this moment. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.